very good morning to you. Just after 6 o'clock on Sunday, January the 19th. I'm David Bull, and this is Weekend Breakfast. Now, it's the weekend, so great news, as you would expect. It's Tin Can Day today. What? Yes! It's a day to honour the humble object invented in the early 1800s by a chap who was a French inventor, actually. Philippe-Henri de Girard, bien sûr. It actually revolutionised the military and the world of exploration because soldiers and explorers could now travel long distances without worrying about the shelf life of their food. Also, it's National Popcorn Day today, a day that celebrates the versatility, taste and fun that it brings. So the big question, you can take your choice. Now, is it butter and salt? Is it caramel? Or is it cheese? Great big pots of popcorn that I see people in the cinema with. But anyway, it's Brew a Potion Day today, a day where you put on your witch hat and you make your own magical concoctions, potions, which you can make, which have been made popular by shows like Harry Potter, of course. They're brewed to make you immortal, to cure diseases, or to fall in love. Fall in love? Keep brewing.
My beautiful potion.
Right, let's start today's show, shall we?
Today's fascinating facts.
So today's fascinating facts: on this day in 1419, Rouen surrendered to Henry V in the 100 Years' War, completing Henry's reconquest of Normandy. On this day in 1661, Thomas Venner was hanged, drawn and quartered in London. Venner was a cooper by trade, but he was also a rebel, the last leader of the Fifth Monarchy men, who had tried unsuccessfully to remove Oliver Cromwell. He subsequently led a coup in London against the newly restored government of Charles II. The coup actually lasted 4 days before the royal authorities captured the rebels. And on this day in 1937, the first play written for British television, The Underground Murder Mystery by J. Bissell Thomas, was broadcast by the BBC. That was in 1937. And those are today's fascinating facts. Well, a very good morning to you. Thank you very much indeed for your company. The news is moving extremely quickly this morning. The front page of The Observer, they're talking about the ceasefire, which is proposed to start in, 25 minutes' time. The Observer front page: fears of chaos in Gaza as families begin their trek home after the ceasefire. This is covered in the Sunday Times as well. I hope for a miracle, but prepare for the worst. Families await Hamas hostages, dead or alive. I've got some breaking news for you. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says a ceasefire in Gaza has now been delayed until Hamas releases a list of hostages. Just to remind you, the aim of this, and it is a very complicated sequential deal. So essentially 3 hostages to be released first, but they have to name those hostages for this ceasefire to take effect in now 24 minutes time. It is very complicated. We'll talk you through all of it this morning. Georgie Frost, the Times Money Mentors editor-at-large, joins me this morning. Good morning.
A very good morning.
Really nice to see you. Look, this is a very important day. It's a big day, actually, in terms of the ceasefire. I think it's worth saying it's on a knife edge, this.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we were on air together just immediately after the October the 7th attacks. So I feel like you and I have sort of covered this together. Look, whatever happens with this, and hopefully we'll reach a ceasefire, nobody's won here. No, let's be honest.
Not at all.
I mean, there's 46,000 people who've died. I think that, like you said, it's on a knife edge. I think that Benjamin Netanyahu has got a lot of questions to answer for how the attack was allowed to happen in the first place, and that will come home after sort of, hopefully this has been concluded in some way. But of course we've got Donald Trump coming in tomorrow. He would be very keen for a deal to go ahead. Would he risk Benjamin Netanyahu not having that deal? I think Hamas would say that they, to a degree, have won, as it were.
Do you think?
Can you win? I would imagine so. I think that they haven't. I think the big problem is Benjamin Netanyahu never set out what his plan was. How was it going to end?
It's an extremely good point, and of course Trump incumbency or coming into power tomorrow, there would have been enormous pressure on Netanyahu to do a deal. I mean, I think when you look at this, just in terms of the prisoner swap, 33 hostages to be released in exchange for 1,890 prisoners, which is a huge number of prisoners, and many people on the right in Israel very unhappy about this. Ben Gvir, for example, saying that he voted against this, and he didn't like the detail of this deal at all. And as you say, obviously the pressure coming from the US onto Netanyahu, but also I think your point is really valid. Who has won this?
No, nobody's won this. This is not a winnable. War is not winnable. Let's be honest. In how we would understand it, it's not a game either.
No.
But this is a three-part process, which, as you say, it's all dependent on those three parts. So the first one being, as you say, some of the hostages released. Certainly in the initial phase, it will be those who are over 50, children. Can you believe that there are children being held hostage for 15 months or however long it's been? And also Israel moving away from some of the large. The Israeli soldiers moving away from some of the larger cities, and it goes all the way through to the third phase, which is rehabilitation and rebuilding of that area, which will take enormous, I would sort of say, international cooperation to get that done.
Years.
Absolutely, years.
I mean, it's worth just remembering the figures here. More than 46,870 people have been killed in Gaza.
Yeah.
I mean,
how many people displaced, their homes destroyed? Absolutely, it's a.
The whole thing is a shocking human tragedy. But you're right. So Hamas, this unprovoked attack on October the 7th, 1,200 people or thereabouts, and of course then you've got the real impact of this and just the true devastation. I don't think we really understand what it's like if you are a Palestinian to be displaced and to be trying to rebuild your life. And of course that's the front page of the Observer this morning, basically saying fears of chaos. Families begin to trek home. Trek home to what?
No, absolutely. And this is where I think Israel, as the sort of democratically elected, etc., I suppose partner, would you call it a partner of America, needs to step up and start rebuilding. But, you don't know what it's like to be Palestinian. I don't know what it's like to live in a country like Israel, where every country all around you wants you not to exist. I mean, there's no simplicity here, and I think politics has come into play as well. Hamas have a lot to blame. There's a lot of people within Gaza that don't agree with Hamas and don't agree with the methods that they've used. Certainly anyone who looked at those shocking images on October the 7th cannot but say how horrendous they were. Absolutely horrific. And I don't think you can either argue as well as to a country's right to get back their hostages. I mean, I keep thinking if someone had come into our country, if they had taken, my sister or my nephew, if they had raped and tortured and done all those things, then I would be, horrified. But then there is absolutely blame on the Israeli government, on Netanyahu, who I think is, politically speaking, was very fragile even before this event happened. And I think, to be fair, he's cracked down extra hard because of the reason that he was caught with, to borrow an American expression, with his pants down.
Very much so. And of course he is trying to hold together a very fragile coalition. As I said, you've got the right wing pushing him to go harder and faster. I think you're also correct in that there was never an end point. He said he was going to obliterate Hamas, but what does that mean?
No, it's impossible, absolutely impossible. However, I think that the expectations of Hamas when they did it have not come to fruition either. I think that the fact that, there's been quite a lot of instability around that area, instability caused as a result of this. I think Iran have been shown as to be weak, things like Hezbollah as well. I think what they might have hoped for hasn't come about. But yes, I mean, certainly in creating shock, I think has certainly happened.
Just in terms of the timing, and it is very complicated, let me just explain what's going on. So they have to name these 3 hostages to be released today, which is meant to be happening in 20 minutes' time. Over the next few weeks, then, 33 hostages are set to be released in exchange for 1,890 Palestinian prisoners. Israel, at the same time, will pull back its troops in Gaza. No one knows where the location is where these hostages are going to be handed over, so they're sort of preparing for anywhere across across the border. Then the second phase, the talks about the terms of the second phase are going to start on day 16 of the first phase. Then they're going to look at trying to achieve a permanent end to the war. Again, the terms of that deal very uncertain at this point. At this point, remaining hostages, including men, would be freed at this stage. More Palestinian prisoners detained in Israeli prisons. And then the third and final stage, as you say, the most complicated, which is rebuilding.
Yeah, absolutely. I do hope, and maybe I am naive in this hope, that this is the war to end the wars here. Because I hope that.
But look at history.
No, absolutely.
The Middle East is a hotbed of war.
Of course it is. Of course it is. But you have to hope that this has shocked the world so much to think that we have to do something. And I do think that to a certain extent, if you look at the polls, actually, and they're really difficult to work out, but only 16% of people within Gaza actually would vote for Hamas now.
Yes, of course.
So I do think that now is an opportunity where people have looked and said, actually, there's horrors on both sides, and I do hope...
Of course there are.
I do hope Israel takes a really good, long, hard look at the way that it's conducted its politics over many, many years. But I do think we need to come to some sort of two-state solution. And don't get me wrong, there are people, and there will always be people, who do not believe Israel has a right to exist.
I agree.
And will never countenance a two-part. But we have got to come to a state, and I think the best way to do this, and I'm not just saying this because I'm a finance person, is to rebuild the economy, to rebuild the houses, etc., and the dignity of the people who live in Gaza. That's the only way, and I think this is where Israel need to stand up. And if you think you have the moral high ground, as I said, democratically elected party or country, you need to go in there and you need to, do the best for those people who have been left behind in this absolute state of an area.
I mean, I think also, just talking to my Jewish friends here, there is a sense of entrenchment. The fact is that they believe Israel is right at all costs, and of course no one is ever right at all costs. No side is ever right at all costs. But also you see this breaking out onto the streets of London, the pro-Palestinian protests. If you go and talk to some of those protesters, I don't think they know what they're protesting about, actually.
Look, it's a very... to a certain extent, I agree with you. I think most of my Jewish friends, in fact, don't think that Israel is completely right. I think the political system, as I said, for decades has been a bit of a mess. The fact that Benjamin Netanyahu's come back again, it seems the same old...
And he's fighting for his political life.
But it seems the same old people keep coming back. And also, it's one of those situations, as I said, you don't know what it's like living with every country all around you wanting you destroyed. However, we know in across the world, politicians use fear to their political advantage. And I think for too long that's been used as a political advantage. Don't get me wrong, I have enormous sympathy for both sides. I'm making no judgment here on either side. Those times for questions, for retributions, for all those sorts of, the UN or whoever needs to look at whether international crimes have been committed, etc. There is a time for that. But for now, we need to focus on getting some sort of peace, because there is not a lot of that area that's going to be left soon. And I think the world is losing patience and sympathy, I think to a degree, for both, for Hamas and for Israel at the moment. And I just think we need to just find some solution. And I really hope that maybe the fact that this has been so shocking, that there is a drive now to find a solution. And maybe Donald Trump is the person to do it.
Well, you see, I think that is the key to all of this, and I'm very mindful of the fact that he comes into power tomorrow, and there will be enormous political pressure being put on Netanyahu as a result of that.
This is no coincidence, the timing of this.
Not at all. Not at all. The latest is Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says his country is ready to resume the war against Hamas should talks for a second phase of the ceasefire fail. He gave a televised speech, actually, a few hours ago in Israel. He stressed the ceasefire is temporary and Israel reserves the right to resume strikes in Gaza, and it had the backing of US President-elect Donald Trump to do so. But how much of this is bluster, I'm not quite so sure, because obviously what he's saying is we have agreed... I mean, it's interesting actually listening to Hamas saying, well, we still almost unconditionally support that ceasefire, and Netanyahu sort of hedging his bets.
Yeah, absolutely. But then that goes back to what I said about how I think that Hamas would have viewed this as a victory of sorts. Yeah. Of course they would have done.
How do you view it as a victory when you kill your own people?
But there's a difference. So I understand this. There's a difference in the way that you view... I've heard Hamas leaders inside saying that these are necessary casualties. There is a view that death is the start of something else. It is actually the ultimate martyrdom. How do you fight that? Whereas in Israel, every death is considered an absolute tragedy, whereas this is viewed as slightly different. So I understand that. That's a very different way of fighting. I mean, look, this is the biggest strike, the biggest shock that Hamas, I understand, have ever created. They have managed to garner protests across the world in support of Palestine. So in that regard, yes, I guess, you know, they would view that as they have succeeded. What the long term will be, I don't know.
I don't think
nobody knows at the moment.
And I think it's fair to say they're sitting on a powder keg here. This is last night. Thousands of protesters gathered in Tel Aviv to demand the government ensures the release of further hostages. So there's huge political pressure on Netanyahu here. At the same time, yesterday, several people were wounded in a stabbing attack near a restaurant in Tel Aviv. The attacker was then shot and killed at the scene by a civilian. Apparently, the suspect came to Tel Aviv illegally from Turkam in the occupied West Bank. I'm also very mindful, and look, I'm no expert here, but also the encroachment by Israel on other territory in the West Bank, for example. It goes back to this idea that actually both sides, that if you're an international arbiter, how do you decide what the resolution of this situation is?
Dr. David, my darling, you and I do not.
No, we don't.
We don't. This has taken years. And the problem with this is I remember having a discussion about this when I was at university with a Jewish friend of mine. And you know, I had no idea about this sort of situation, very, very naive. And he was like, Georgie, how far back do you want to go?
Yeah, well, that's a very good point, isn't it?
And I thought, that's the reality. You're talking like millennia to which if you want to go, this is my land, this is my land. The reality is, and I say this with everything, with Trump, with Brexit, with whatever, I have this kind of view of life.
You had to bring that up, didn't you?
Well, I have this view of life that we are where we are. And going over blame and recriminations and all that sort of thing is not helpful.
Yeah,
We
I mean,
need
that's
to
right.
start
And also,
building from now.
I mean, I was taught a long time ago, you have to look at everything that happens now through the prism of history. Until you understand what happened in the past, you will never understand where we are or where we're going.
But this is the same as, I never really got it until I went to Israel and I got that feeling of what it's like to feel like...
So do you think you have to go to Israel to understand the complexities of
My
this?
argument with that is not so much about going to Israel, it's more about, and as a historian, I always said that you have to understand history, and to a certain extent you do. But what you also have to understand is you will lack an enormous amount of context of what it's like living within that time and in that moment. And until you know what it's like, how can you?
You can't.
Which is why when we go back and we talk about, you know, getting rid of statues of people who were, you know, racist or slave traders or all this sort of thing, we miss the context of the time. Not that any of those things are right.
I heard another story this morning about Peru and a statue, exactly that, looking through the prism of history once again, saying, well, actually, the statue was inappropriate for all those reasons.
We do not look through the prism of history, we look through the prism of our own eyes and our own experience.
Of course you do. Of
those
course you do.
people will not have had.
We'll keep you up to date with the latest on that ceasefire, which is due to begin in 10 minutes' time as and when we get it. I just want to also mention that, of course, there is an awful lot going on because Donald Trump becomes the President of the United States tomorrow. Many notable people are there at the inauguration, including Nigel Farage, Liz Truss is there. I mean, there's a lot that we're going to talk about. The fact is that apparently Trump has said some very nice things about Liz Truss, and there are some great stories this morning. Last night, I tweeted, because it happened to appear on my timeline, saying that Mandelson may well be out as the UK's ambassador to the United States because Donald Trump does not approve. Now, many people said to me this morning, well, hang on a minute, this is an affront to democracy because the US is actually interfering in UK politics. Not true, because the UK ambassador to the United States has to be ratified by the US president. And that will be, number 10 will be in turmoil over all of that. That is the front page of the Sunday Times. And then there's another really interesting article in the Mail, Team Trump's revenge on Starmer for meddling in the US election. They were essentially saying, you sent people over to the United States to interfere in our election. We're going to interfere in your election. We're going to campaign for Nigel Farage.
Which I find a little bit of a strange argument. I mean, I remember at the time that they were heavily critical of it, and then to say, well, you did it, so we're going to do it too.
Well, we'll talk about
you've
that.
Lost the moral high ground.
We'll talk about that. And Sadiq Khan, we spoke a great deal, did we not, yesterday about Sadiq Khan and the fact he wouldn't answer Susan Hall, he wouldn't answer Alex Wilson in the London Assembly. Well, he's written an editorial this morning in The Observer. Khan warns of march of fascism as Trump takes power again. You're the mayor of London. Stop meddling. Honestly, what are you doing? And that got me thinking this morning. And maybe this is a bit of a naughty question. I started thinking this morning, and you know I'm a bit naughty. If you had the power, which politician would you deport?
Oh, you've gone for politician. I think you said anyone.
I did say anyone. All right, anyone.
I prefer anyone.
Do you prefer? Okay.
Yeah,
if you have the power and you can deport anyone in this country at all, who would it be and why? 0344 499 1000. Text the word talk in your message to 87222. You can also WhatsApp us. You can send us a message on X at talkTV. After the break, we'll tell you more about the news that is making the front pages this morning. That's all still to come. Georgie will be here. I'll be here. This is Weekend Breakfast. Good morning. Manchester United legend Dennis Law has died aged 84. He was nicknamed the Lawman. He became one of Old Trafford's most loved players after joining in 1962, very sadly battling dementia.
Yeah, and another one of these former footballers who's gone with this horrible disease. Back in the day when footballs weren't these synthetically made, wonderfully designed things that footballers have nowadays, when they used to be big old sacks of leather with, you know, God knows how many pounds of air in, and they used to be practicing heading with them.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back. This is Talk 626. Good morning, Weekend Breakfast. I'm delighted to say the lovely Georgie Frost is with me, the Times Money Mentors editor at large. Georgie, why haven't I got any money?
I'm afraid it's a bit above my pay grade. I don't know that, but
we'll talk about some financial. Can I just ask you, and we will talk about this later, what on earth is going on with interest rates, with the pound, with... I mean, it is extraordinary, and I was talking to Gabriella, who's the setup producer, just saying we're relatively switched on, both of us. Neither of us have a clue what is going on in terms of interest rates. 1 minute they're not happening, then they might... The cuts, they may come in. No one... I don't know what's going on. Do you?
This is really early in the morning for me to try and describe this. But, I mean, look, the way that... Let's kind of try and, you know, give this in a really simplistic way. The way that the government tries to get money in to, you know, invest in infrastructure projects, etc., is tax, but doesn't give them nearly enough. So they have to invest. How they do that is they basically sell a bit of debt. These are called gilts bonds, right? Now, for people to invest in you, to give you money, to loan you money, they want a bit of money back, right? As you would, right? And this is what's called yields. Now, the higher the yields means the more money you have to pay back. If it's higher, it means that they think, maybe you're not that great for it.
I think that's where we are.
Yields going up, right, means that investors are looking at this country and going, I'm not entirely sure you know what you're talking about or you know what you're doing. Now, why it's specific? Well, we are seeing this happen across the world, right? That's you know, where, you know, government debt is going up. And, of course, if you have to pay people more money to loan you money, that costs more. So we're going to have to spend more money servicing our debts, right? And we are already almost at maximum, right? 100% GDP, right? We've got a lot of debt. So this isn't looking very pretty. And it almost wipes out pretty much all of those tax raises that we got and all those difficult decisions that came in the budget. Which means what? Which means that come the next time, the spring budget or statement, more difficult decisions are going to have to be made because Rachel Reeves wants to stick within her spending rules. So that's the situation in a nutshell, and I hope that explains it. But what I was saying is that there is one sort of small difference, and, you know, this has been coming quite slowly. It's different to the Liz Truss situation. But the problem is that who has been lending us money? And it is foreign investors. And the problem with foreign investors is they're a little bit more flaky. And so when they think they could find a better deal elsewhere, they will run for the hills, which leaves us even more struggling to get those loans in, to borrow money, and therefore we'll have to pay even more money for people to loan us money.
I think you should be Chancellor.
Do you think?
Yes, I do. I think
Did they explain it at 6:30 in the morning?
I think you'd be a very good Chancellor indeed. I shall have words with people in high places.
On the back of that, though.
I love the way you brushed that off.
Oh, no, yeah, hardly. But all of this sort of feeds into sort of interest rate decisions, inflation, etc. So are we going to get, you know, we've got very slow economy at the moment. You know, growth is very slow. The only way we're going to drive more investment, etc., is we need to get the economy growing. And one of those things to do that, I suppose, is we could lower interest rates, etc. And that's why there's a bit of toing and froing. Is the economy strong enough to withstand that, etc., etc.? So that's why you get all these decisions about interest rates and inflation and stuff. And I think what with Trump coming in tomorrow, there is a concern that some of his tariff policies, you know, basically, if you bring stuff into the country, you're going to have to pay a lot of money, could be inflationary.
But this goes back to a much bigger issue for the Labour government, which is actually don't go on the offensive against the incoming president, right? So Trump loves this country. His mother was born in this country and born in Scotland. And so, therefore, by default, he likes this country. Now, we are meant to be a sovereign nation because of Brexit. We allegedly took back control of our money, laws and borders, allegedly. The point about this is actually, if they were smart, they would look at Trump and that relationship and hold it closely. And that brings me nicely to some other stories this morning. Sunday Times still. Is Mandelson at risk from MAGA? This broke last night, and I have to say, a little smirk came across my face last night. Members of Donald Trump's White House team are working with reform in Britain. Speculation mounts the incoming president would block Lord Mandelson as the UK ambassador to the United States. Now, Trump allies are also advising the new president to signal his displeasure to Keir Starmer by putting him at the back of the queue when it comes to a trade deal. The Labour leader is unlikely to be given the same swift swift access to Trump as Theresa May, who became the first foreign leader to meet the president 4 days after his inauguration. So that begs the question, when will Starmer meet Trump? Well, probably next year. Downing Street also is said to be concerned that the Reform leader will turn Trump's inauguration into the Nigel Farage show, and are debating, wait for this, their golden bullet, right? This is Downing Street's golden bullet to counter Nigel Farage is David Lammy.
You know when I spoke about investors saying
Yes.
you don't know what you're doing?
Yes.
I mean, I despair to a certain extent, but I look. There's a more serious issue. I mean, I think one, did nobody do due diligence on those people like Lammy, for example, or Mandelson, who've been highly critical of the incoming president? Look, I know lots of people think he's not great, right?
No, sure.
Right, okay.
But you don't go on record calling him a neo-Nazi sympathising sociopath.
No, you absolutely don't. Not unless you're medically qualified, etc. And even then, you shouldn't do it.
Not really.
I think it's absolutely horrendous. Horrible language that has then been used by people on social media to bait other people. I think it's a terrible language. But the serious, you are representatives of the UK people. And there, of course, will be people who don't agree with Donald Trump, but you are there to represent our interests in the best way possible. Whether you like Trump or not, he is going to be president. He was democratically elected by the American people. It is their right to have Donald Trump as president. So I'm not saying we need to turn over and, you know, suck up really badly, but what you should do is show respect. Don't have language like this. Also, I think it's demeaning of Britain generally.
So do I.
That people who are in powerful positions use this sort of language. But what it means is that we are now less important. I mean, I'm just looking at a story here on page 4 of the Mail. So Davos is happening. It's the sort of... It's the big, you know, brouhaha or the event where all the rich investors come.
Where you're flying in your private jet, getting your Range Rover.
Absolutely, but very important people go there and they discuss very important things about money. We don't even have a seat at the table. We are not even invited. Not even Rachel Reeves, our Chancellor, has a spot there. We are falling down in importance. So it's very interesting, though, that Nigel Farage will have a top seat at Trump's table, as it were, because after the Elon Musk sort of...
Well, I actually spoke to Farage's team as they were boarding the plane to Washington.
Check you out.
Well, you know how it is. You know, I mix with in high places. Sources from Trump actually said Trump's team love Nigel, in inverted commas. They're keen to help him and Reform succeed. They say they haven't forgotten that 100 Labour officials travelled to the US to volunteer for Kamala Harris. Nigel Farage is having a ball over there and got his big spoon out and is stirring the pot. This is yesterday, he spoke at a lunch for military veterans attended by the incoming US Defence Secretary, Pete Hegseth. So Farage and Hegseth next to each other. On Friday, he was at the £150,000 Stars and Stripes and Union Jack party, which sounds great, that, at the rooftop of the Hay Adams Hotel overlooking the White House. He then spoke in front of 300 guests, including Steve Bannon, the former Trump aide. He stressed the importance of the special relationship. He is going to the inauguration, as is Boris Johnson. By the way, Donald Trump said, I love Boris. Oh,
yeah, absolutely. I mean...
Because he is an alpha male.
Yeah, no, precisely. Look, there are 3 people that should have been doing those things. You know...
What, the ones in the government?
Keir Starmer, Mandelson or Lammy, right?
Yeah.
Our US ambassador-elect... our Prime Minister or our Foreign Secretary. It shouldn't be Nigel Farage. So all power to his hand for doing what our government cannot do, and that is diplomacy.
It is extraordinary, isn't it? And I don't... Just when you look at the optics of that Starmer isn't invited, now, not necessarily who you would expect the Prime Minister to be invited.
TikTok is going to be his... I mean, oh my God.
But the fact that Boris Johnson is there and Liz Truss is there as well, and she was so parodied as a lettuce. And of course, she
I
actually...
think unfairly so, actually.
I think
totally
she
has
agree.
been slightly justified over the last sort of
I think
weeks.
she was right. I think the delivery was terrible, and Kwasi Kwarteng and the way that happened. But actually, Donald Trump likes Liz Truss.
Yes, he does, because actually she is about growth. And if you look at the Labour message now, it's actually quite similar to that message that she had. Like you say, the delivery was a bit wrong. The optics of, you know, cuts for the wealthiest perhaps weren't the best timing. But actually, if you look at a recent report into, you know, and we talked about gilt yields going up, she broke the economy. Actually, that was only about 2/3 of that had nothing to do with her at all.
No, I know.
So actually, it was all to do with sort of other sort of, you know,
dark political forces.
No, it was more to do with, I'm thinking, long-term derivative investments. I won't go into that. It's far too early in the morning. I think I've even got the terminology wrong. But it was to do with something else that was going on with investments, etc. at the time. So, you know, the point being is, if not Keir Starmer, then I would also say, and we haven't mentioned her here, where's Kemi Badenoch?
It's a great point.
I mean, that was the time, I would say, for her to really shine, because, you know, Elon Musk has been saying some nice overtures to her. I would suggest that she is, you know, well positioned, perhaps. And look, again, this is not about sucking up or doing anything, but the reality is, if Trump comes in and he brings, you know, a minimum, and quite maybe he will, 10% universal tariff, it will cost us enormously. Honestly, billions of pounds.
But you see, if we play our cards right and he levies that on the EU, but the UK is exempt, then happy days.
You are representing Britain's best interests.
I agree.
And right now, that is to get our economy growing so people can start feeling better about their lives.
I am representing Britain's best interest by going to this ad break. We'll continue this conversation after that. Just on that note, if you had the power, who would you deport? And why would you deport them? Also, if you have seen her, let us know where she is. Have you seen Kemi Badenoch? Let me know your thoughts, please. This is Weekend Breakfast.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back. This is Weekend Breakfast. I'm in a very naughty mood this morning with Georgie Frost, the Times Money Mentors editor-at-large. And you've been at large, actually. You've been around the world.
I have.
Where
Toronto.
have you been?
So after Christmas, I went to Toronto.
Yeah.
And then I got back, and then 5 days later, I went to San Francisco for work, and I have just got back. So I have no idea what time it is.
No.
It feels early.
Do you know,
I'm jet-lagged.
I worked in San Francisco for a while. It is such a sad city, isn't it? Just the levels of drug use and what was once that whole kind of, what is it called, market. used to have some grand facades and great shops, and actually there's terrible poverty and deprivation and drug use.
So, I mean, I've just downloaded the book San Francisco to read, but so I was warned before I went out there, because I went out for work, that, you know, be careful, don't walk in the morning. I mean, literally the conference centre was, you know, 10 minutes, but we'd have to get there for 7 in the morning, don't walk. But actually I was looked around and I was like, no, this is absolutely fine. I mean, I was at the top of the hill, I was in the Fairmont, it was all very lovely.
Very nice.
As I was leaving the city and we were driving to the airport, I passed through only what I can describe as what you said. This was something that you do not expect in a country like America.
No.
And it's interesting, and I keep thinking about Trump talking about, you know, Panama and Mexico and Canada and Greenland and all these other sort of foreign policy decisions, and I think you have a huge domestic problem at home.
Massive.
It was, you know, people were sort of dancing in the streets so high, you know, lots of people, you know, this was 2 in the afternoon, of working age were not working, lots of people in wheelchairs, you know, it was incredibly poor, incredibly drug infested, and it was it was one of those times when I was like, I think we should lock the, you know, it felt very unsafe and very
also LA has the same problem. I mean, Skid Row, which is, you know, obviously was reached notoriety and things like Little Shop of Horrors, but I've seen just abject poverty and just, as you say, people just wandering around like zombies.
Yeah, LA I've been to quite a few times again for work over the last few years, and to see, especially something like Venice Beach, which is now literally just tents, and this tent city, and again, I just can't believe that in a country which believes in, and they were talking about this actually, the people I was working with, they say, oh, sorry, Georgie, because you're British, but American exceptionalism. A lot of what Donald Trump talks about comes from this perspective, again, of American exceptionalism, that we are better. They do. There is a belief that we are better. And I look around and think, no, you're not better. Not if you allow your people to be in a situation.
I admire that. So when I lived there, people celebrate success. So if you've made your own way in life, and if you started a company and you've done well out of it, people would say, oh, that's amazing.
Agreed.
In this country, we would...
My dad always used to say that the difference between America and the UK is, in America, if they see you driving a lovely car, they want that car.
Yeah.
In the UK, they want to key that car, right? That's the difference. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. But that, you know, there is something. But you're right. There's something about success and, you know, money. The way they talk about money is a bit more open. It's a bit more flashy. It's a bit more, you know. But that doesn't mean that you start from a point where you expect success, that you are exceptional. And I think this feeds into this, like I said, a lot of what Trump talks about, the way he talks, the way he perceives, you know, America to be this kind of bastion that, oh, Canada's the 51st state, and he can talk down to Canada because they are exceptional, you know? But you look in these cities and you look at these people and the poverty, and I'm reading a book called Eviction at the moment, which just talks about Milwaukee and the fact that so many of the poor are renters, and the abject poverty and the state of the properties in which they're living. You cannot imagine.
No.
Like, I can't, if that happens in the UK, then I would be unbelievably shocked, and I need to find out. But this is just incredible, the way some people live. That disparity in wealth is so obvious in America. It's very uncomfortable.
It is. Right. This morning I'm being very naughty. I'm saying, if you had the power, who would you deport from this country and why? And the reason I'm asking that is Donald Trump says his deportations will start immediately that he takes office in the United States. So I started thinking this morning, well, if I had the power, who would I deport and why? The number 0344 499 1000, calls charged at the national rate. Text the word talk in your message to 87222. You can also WhatsApp us. You can send us a message on X as well. Good morning, Dr. David and the lovely Georgie.
Oh, hello.
Oh, the lovely Georgie. This is Glenn in Leeds.
Hi, Glenn.
Yeah. Hi, Glenn. I would love to deport Sir Two-Tier Gear, but he's never here unless Lord Ali is buying him free gear. And Lady Victoria is sponging. Have a great day, Glenn. Thank you very much indeed. Georgie will be round shortly. Jeanette, good morning, David. I would actually deport the whole Labour front bench. But if I had just one, it would be Ed Miliband. The damage he's doing to this country is my worst fear. That's Jan in Newcastle. Good morning to you. Alison hasn't minced her words here. David, it's Khan, Starmer, Reeves, Rayner, Lammy, Mandelson, the rest of the Labour Party, the Liberal Undemocrats and most of the Conservative Party. Right, Alison, OK, thanks. I hope you're enjoying your Frosties this morning or any other breakfast cereal. Sean, good morning, David and Georgie. A question for you. Can the dire economic situation force an election? Ooh, by any chance. Something needs to trigger an election before we become a basket case.
I am not a political sort of expert on this, but I would suggest that the situation is not that bad to trigger something.
But if you had a vote of no confidence, I assume...
It's not ideal,
No.
but there's nothing... well, it's not ideal, but there's nothing really...
Your frames of reference for not ideal.
I know, right. Understatement. No, but to be honest, let's not forget the hospital pass that they were given, the Labour Party, after 14 years of stagnation. And, you know, they were not given an easy ride. Like, don't get me wrong, they seem to be making mistake after mistake, and there's no question about it. However, I don't think the situation... I think what we're seeing in certainly the gilt markets, I think we're starting to see that come back. You know, growth is a little bit, etc., etc., and certainly the noise that they're making, and we will talk about this after the hour, is talking about the regulators, the financial regulators, being asked to find ways in which we can promote growth with some of the sort of regulations. And this I think is really important. Now I can give them a couple of ideas of what we can do to promote growth, but you know, I don't think we're in a situation where that is the case, that we're as dire, you know, and I say that in a hopefully a positive way. I know a lot of people are not happy with the current government, but you know, I don't think it's going to be enough right now to trigger any kind of election. But you never know.
No, you never know.
This is the surprising and the weirdness of the last, you know, certainly 5 years, that anything could happen, and I say that with a nervous laughter.
Yeah. Let's just pivot to look at what is going on in Gaza. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says a ceasefire in Gaza has been delayed until Hamas releases a list of hostages. Hamas is failing to meet its obligations of a ceasefire deal. It has been delayed until Hamas meets its obligations, according to an IDF spokesperson. This is Daniel Hagari. The issue appears to be a failure by Hamas to provide a list of names of the 3 Israeli hostages it plans to release today. More concerningly, Hagari said Israeli military will now continue its military operations in Gaza until those obligations are met. We'll keep an eye on what is going on, but Georgie, this is what we said right at the beginning of the programme. This is fragile, to say the least.
Yeah, of course it is. And Israel will be absolutely determined not to look weak. Again, we spoke about it earlier, the sort of political issues that surround Benjamin Netanyahu, and the fact that this all came as a very unwelcome surprise, and the fact that what was he doing? How did he allow this to happen? So I think he's going to be absolutely determined not to be seen as weak, not to be seen to be conceding. This is already looks to be, you know, let's be honest, a loss. It's a loss for everyone.
It is.
You know, a loss for everyone. In terms of Israel, they had no plan, they had no end goal, there was no clear direction of what they hoped to achieve. You are fighting not just people, and he hoped to smash Hamas. You're fighting ideology, which is so much harder to do.
Yeah.
And this is the problem, and this is why it's so entrenched, is for every battle or war that you fight in this, you create a whole swathe of people more sympathetic to the cause.
Of course you do.
And then the whole thing perpetuates. So someone needs to climb down from this, and they need to start meeting, not even in the middle, they just need to start meeting and making a decision. And it would be a real shame for everybody involved if we don't get the hostages back and we don't stop the killings that are going on in Gaza. And indeed, 5 Israeli soldiers got killed the other day. So, you know, it's happening across both sides. So it's a tragic, horrible, needless waste of life.
It really
that
is.
Needs to stop. And like I said, I hope that this creates a turning point in the Middle East. Am I optimistic of that?
Yeah, I think we all share your sentiment, actually. Georgie, thank you for the moment. We'll take a break. After the break, we'll keep an eye on what is going on in Gaza with this ceasefire. I will also take you through this morning's papers as well, all the front pages, everything you need to know this morning. There is a lot of news this morning. This is Weekend Breakfast. Good morning.
I mean, if we look at the Rotherham scandal, it was the worst thing that's happened to this country in the last century. You know, there's been avoidance and finger-pointing about that, so...
But he was pushing her to say Pakistani grooming gangs, which is factually correct. She didn't do that. Now, maybe she should have done that, but the contempt in which he held the other Assembly members there is transparent. Alex Wilson also mentions, look, kids are dying on the streets of London. He is the Mayor of London.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Good morning, this is Talk. 7 minutes to 7 already on Sunday, January the 19th. I'm joined by the lovely Georgie. I'm also being a bit naughty this morning and saying, well, it got me thinking, Georgie, if I had the power, who would I deport from this country? And that's based on Donald Trump saying the deportations are going to start immediately. Many people getting in contact. Mark in Selby, good morning to you. Mark says, this is very dangerous, David, your question, because given the chance, I'd deport every single one of the people who've entered the UK illegally over the last decade. They're bringing our standard of living down in order to raise theirs, whilst costing us millions of pounds and putting British citizens at risk. Sonia in Somerset, I rather enjoyed this. David, from my personal point of view, I would deport my soon-to-be ex-husband.
Brilliant. Marvellous.
But otherwise, our Prime Minister, most definitely. Sonia, very good. We like that. Sharon Miller, one of our regulars. Good morning. I love your shirt, David. Thank you very much. It's parrots, actually.
Yeah, it's nice.
Yeah. I bought it, actually, when I was going on holiday.
Oh,
which
right.
seems a dim and distant past. Jason says, can we sack Sadiq Khan? I'm not quite sure that's deportation, though, but OK. Margaret in Tunisia again. Good morning, Margaret. How's Tunisia? Good morning. Well, I know. That's how we roll. Good morning, David. Can I pick only one person to deport? Now, look, David, if I had my way, it would be two minimum. One is Sadiq Khan and two Starmer. I feel both of them are a threat to the country, the British people and democracy. Get rid, I say, and good riddance. Keep all of these messages coming in. They're rather brilliant. Now, on a serious note, let me just tell you the latest. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says the Gaza ceasefire will not go ahead until Hamas provides the names of the first hostages it plans to release. Now, Hamas has rebutted this, saying the delay is due to technical reasons. Now, according to the ceasefire, this is what I was trying to explain earlier, the names need to be provided at least 24 hours before a planned exchange. So the sequencing of this is that the three named hostages will be released first, and then the rest of it follows sequentially. Most worrying, though, according to Daniel Hagari, who's the IDF spokesman, he says that because of this failure by Hamas to provide the names, then the Israeli military would continue its military operations in Gaza until those obligations were met. And look, at the end of the day here, whilst we are sort of standing on that precipice looking at what is hopefully a peace deal, given these strikes will continue, human life is at risk. And that's the bit I just find so difficult to comprehend, is that you've got politicians, two sides, who are playing chicken.
Yeah.
And the people, real people, are in the middle of it.
Well, that's always been the way, though.
I know.
That's the
but
tragedy of all of this.
I suppose what I'm saying is that if this ends like in an hour, and there are casualties in that hour, intervening hour, that in some ways just sort of amplifies.
Highlights, yeah. No,
it amplifies it.
Absolutely. Every delay risks a loss of life. And, you know, so we need, it needs to be sped up. But, you know, technical delays?
Yeah, what does that mean?
Technical delays? I mean, this is not, you know, trying to pay for a banana with your smartphone here.
No, very, very true. Lots of other stories in the headlines this morning. Obviously, the papers are now hopelessly out of date about the ceasefire. I also want to talk about Sadiq Khan in the next hour. Khan has written this article in The Observer. Now, yesterday, this elicited a huge amount of response from our audience. Sadiq Khan now, on the offensive, warns of a march of fascism as Donald Trump takes power. I'll explain what he says and what he's written after the break. And I just find that extraordinary that the Mayor of London, let me get this right, he is a regional politician, is wading in on federal issues in the United States and talking about a rise of fascism. And this comes on the back of yesterday when he refused in the London Assembly to talk to Susan Hall, who actually I thought did a marvellous job in the London Assembly. And Alex Wilson also just said, look, let's have this cross-party support to wipe out knife crime in the capital. And he just said, I make it a matter of principle never to work with reform, which I thought was puerile and pathetic.
This is not what we expect from politicians. Absolutely not. You know, that sort of language, that sort of attitude is just... I mean, even if it's a democratically elected, what disrespect, you may not like reform, but what disrespect you have for the people that vote for them. It's disgusting. It is disgusting. And actually, I think the greatest politicians are those that have friends cross-party.
Absolutely.
You can disagree,
Absolutely. But at the end of the day, you can go to the bar and you can have a beer with them.
Absolutely.
A bit early for beer, actually. 6:58. David, I'm asking this morning, if you had the power, who would you deport and why? Bruce, good morning to you. David, I would deport just one person, and that is me, to a deserted desert island, living the dream. I will accompany you, I think. And also, Sam says the same thing in Lancashire. Good morning, Dr. Dave. If it's somewhere nice, can I deport myself and my family? Ah, ha, ha. Well, absolutely. We've tapped into something there. Sam, thank you very much. Bruce, thank you very much as well. Loads of you getting in touch. Keep all of those messages coming in, please. After the break, we'll go through all of this morning's papers. I promise we'll do that. We'll talk more about the proposed ceasefire. Also, are Reeves and Starmer running out of time? That's the big question. I think they are. Keep all those messages coming in, please. This is Weekend Breakfast. Don't go anywhere. A very good morning to you.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile. The home of common sense. This is Talk.
Good morning to you. It's just after 7 o'clock now on Sunday, January the 19th. I'm David Bull. This is Weekend Breakfast. Thank you very much indeed for your company. It's the weekend. Yay! That means great news, great news. It's Tin Can Day today, a day to honour the humble object invented in the early 1800s by a French inventor called Philippe-Henri de Girard. Bien sûr. It revolutionised the military and the world of exploration. The reason for that is soldiers and explorers could now travel long distances without worrying about the shelf life of their food. Also today, it's National Popcorn Day, a day that celebrates the versatility, taste and fun that popcorn brings. Also, you can take your choice. Is it butter and salt? Is it caramel? Is it cheese? I used to make popcorn. I've just realised that. I've just remembered that. It's Brew a Potion Day today, a day where you put on your witch hat. And you make your own magical concoctions. Potions, which have been made very popular by movies such as Harry Potter, are brewed to make you immortal, cure disease, or fall in love. Keep brewing.
In my potion, my beautiful potion.
My beautiful potion. Right, let's move on to today's fascinating facts.
Today's fascinating facts.
So I'm going to spoil you new ones this hour. On this day in 1736, the birth in Greenock of James Watt. Now, he is a very important man, a Scottish inventor who developed Newcomen's steam engine. He gave his name to a unit of power, a watt. On 29th of May 2009, the Bank of England announced that Watt and his business partner, Matthew Bolton, would appear on the £50 note. On this day in 1848, the birth of Matthew Webb, the first person to swim the English Channel. He did this in 1875 on the 25th of August. He took 21 hours and 45 minutes full. And on this day in 1937, I love this one, the 18-year-old ballet dancer, English ballet dancer actually, Margot Fontaine made her debut in Giselle at Sadler's Wells in London. And those are today's fascinating facts. Well, I'm delighted to say joining me this morning, the lovely, glamorous Georgie Frost, the Times Money Mentors editor at large. Good morning.
Good morning.
You're looking very intellectual.
Well,
it threw me.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Do not normally look intellectual. It's the glasses. I've got new glasses.
The glasses.
Yeah, I got new
I
glasses.
had those in the 80s.
Do you know what? I got some glasses, right?
Yeah.
You know, now I'm a tender age of something,
Yes.
and I thought I need to get glasses.
Right.
So I got some glasses, and I thought, these look lovely. My mum looks at me and she said, oh, they look like what I got given by the NHS in the 80s. And so I changed them, and now you've said my new ones are like that.
When I was at med school, I had glasses just like that.
I think I look like Penfold. Do you remember Penfold? Yeah.
I'm thinking about it.
Your
He's a mole.
producers are too
Is
young
it
to
Penfold?
remember. Yeah, the
He's
mole.
a mole.
Yes,
Yeah.
in Danger Mouse.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I look like.
That shows we have very misspent youth. Now, let's talk about the most important and pressing issue of the day, steel cans,
Yes.
tin cans. These are very important. Traditionally made of tin plate, the tin coating stopped the contents from rusting the steel. I thought that was very interesting. They were soldered originally with neurotoxic high lead solders. Not a great idea to have lead in your food. They were banned in the 1990s. It was originally invented by, as I said, Philippe de Girard. But the idea was patented in 1810 by Peter Durand. It was based, the idea, on experimental food preservation work in glass containers the year before by another inventor called Nicolas Appert. The canning process, and we may laugh at it, is brilliant. If you think about canned foods and how reliant we are on canned foods, whether it's prunes, which I'm a big fan
Massive,
of,
yeah.
as is your mother, by the way, prunes or pineapple or baked beans, it's revolutionised our food.
Oh, hugely. I mean, I'm still a big fan. I'm still a big fan of canned fruit.
Oh,
I
me
mean, when
too.
I was younger, though, do you remember the canned cocktail fruit? That was what you got for fruit.
You still buy it.
None of these lychees and all the posh fruit you get
And
nowadays.
those cherries. The cherries that don't look like cherries.
And you only got one.
You get one. Yeah, that's fine.
But I still have, prunes and peaches and cans.
Also, so the 70s is coming back. I'm rather liking a cheese and pineapple stick.
Are you?
Yes, I am.
Do you want to give more context to that?
No, but the whole idea that all of those foods have come back in, quiche. Real men eat quiche.
Quiche never went out, come on.
Didn't it? It did.
No.
But cheese and pineapple.
Yeah,
did you not remember in the 70s they used to hand those around? It's Abigail's party all over again.
Of course they do, but who does that anymore?
I do.
Where'd you do it? Just yourself for a little snack. I'm going to cut myself a cube of cheddar and a little pineapple from a can.
And a glass of cherry.
The pièce de resistance on top.
Actually, that reminds me, my mum used to have a pot of glacé cherries, which you would just snack on. Who has those?
Yeah, I do. If I make a Christmas cake every year.
Oh, there you go. Yeah. Good morning. Sorry, we're digressing slightly, but it is fascinating. And, of course, inventions like this are really important because it did allow exploration and people to be able to travel and so on. So, anyway, it's, what was it? Tin Can Day today to celebrate the humble object invented in the early 1800s. I digress slightly because the news that we are met with this morning is not great. Let me tell you the latest in Gaza. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says the Gaza ceasefire will not go ahead until Hamas provides the names of the first hostages that it plans to release. So just to remind you, the idea of this is that 3 hostages will be released initially. They have to be named. Allegedly, they have to be named 24 hours before they are released. The ceasefire was due to come in some 40 minutes ago. It hasn't. The rebuttal from Hamas is they say this delay is down to technical field decisions. So that line has changed as well. It was originally technical decisions, now technical field reasons. Now, this agreement is complicated, but what we do know from the IDF, this is Daniel Hagari, he spoke at 6:30 this morning. He says that actually the Israeli military will continue its military operations in Gaza until those obligations are met. We'll keep a close eye on what is going on there. Lots going on in the papers this morning, and obviously the front page of the Observer this morning. This is fears of chaos in Gaza as families begin their trek home after the ceasefire. The aid agencies in Gaza are bracing for chaotic scenes this week as hundreds of thousands of people try to return to their homes in the territory after the implementation of this ceasefire, if and when it comes into effect. However, in the last 24 hours, 23 Palestinians have been killed. The Israeli army says it's conducted strikes on 50 terror targets. This happened yesterday. Biden and Trump are both claiming that it's down to them and they are the reason for the ceasefire. Now, Benjamin Netanyahu appeared on television last night to the Israeli people saying the ceasefire will not come into force until Hamas revealed the names of the hostages. We were talking about this, and that Netanyahu is trying to appear to be very strong on the world stage. Now, he is also fighting the factions on the right, so people like Ben Gvir, who is very unhappy about this deal being done in the first place. He announced his intention to resign from the government. This has actually made not all of the front pages, but some of the front pages. Sunday Times this morning, I hope for a miracle, but I prepare for the worst. Families await Hamas hostages, dead or alive. I'll just take you... Now, this is really interesting as well, because tomorrow is the inauguration of Donald Trump. Starmer noticeably is not there. Nigel Farage is there. Liz Truss is there. Tobias Ellwood is there, actually. Loads of notable politicians are there. Front page of the Mail, Team Trump's revenge on Starmer for meddling in the US election. They say, right, you tried to meddle in our election, we're going to campaign for Nigel Farage. Make of that what you will. Lots of other big papers this morning. This is a complicated story. The Sunday Telegraph, the Attorney General in a row over the Chagos refugees. This is the Attorney General, Lord Hermer. He is facing a conflict of interest, according to this, because he was a lawyer and he tried to take the UK government to court on behalf of Sri Lankan asylum seekers trying to get to Britain from the Chagos Islands, which are obviously now disputed. That deal put on hold until Trump comes into power. Now, they hope to be able to come to Britain. That was dismissed by the High Court. Now, wait for this. After he was appointed Attorney General by Sir Keir Starmer, guess what? There was a one-off deal granted where 61 asylum seekers were then allowed into the United Kingdom. That's the front page of the Sunday Telegraph. Georgie is a financial expert. I just want to go back to this because there's a story that was around this week, and I think it's an important one. You and I spoke about the fact that we need to grow the economy. There is no doubt about
Everybody's
that.
spoken about that.
Well, I don't think Rachel Reeves realises that, but anyway. One of the stories that's doing the rounds is about mortgage rules. Obviously, you can tell us more about this, but post the crash, it was deemed that actually lending was too easy by those mortgage companies. And so what they're saying is that strict rules on mortgage lending could be loosened to allow more people to borrow for a home. This is the FCA. They expect to say they will investigate rules to simplify stuff, which were brought in 2008 financial crisis. I feel desperately sorry for young people because the leverage and how much you can borrow is based on how much you earn and the multiples of what you can earn, and of course that all got tighter, so therefore the amount you could borrow was less.
Yes, look, I don't know if this is Sir Keir's gone to the financial regulator, the FCA, and asked to investigate areas where they can sort of cut back on some sort of red tape or some of the measures that are in place to boost growth, or they're just doing it anyway. I'm not sure. Be that as it may, the FCA have come out with some ideas or proposals as what they could be looking at with which to boost growth. And one of those, as you say, is in 2014 we got these stricter mortgage lending rules that came in that basically tested your income. One of the measures was tested your income against rising interest rates and whether you could make repayments. Now, of course, we saw interest rates shoot up very quickly, etc., and people were in a bit of trouble. So they looked at that, they scrapped that, I believe, a couple of years ago. What they were also talking is multiple of earnings, as you said there, is about 4.5 times your income, which is quite low, basically, for a lot of people when you think about house prices, certainly in the southeast and in London. Now, what they're saying is if we relax all of these measures to make it easier for people who are on lower incomes or who have less sort of capital, less deposit to buy a property, then that may boost growth. The flip side of that is, of course, we don't want to repeat, but I don't think we will get one, because I think banks are, by and large, pretty responsible with their lending. And actually what we're seeing at the moment is not a lot of people defaulting on their mortgages and not a lot of people sort of having repossessed homes. So they're looking at that and saying, well, people are managing it. So actually, if we relax it, then we'll have more opportunity for young people who suffered, you know, and haven't been able to get on the property ladder. The flip side, as I said, is there's a concern, of course, that you don't want too many people over-leveraging themselves, but also you have an issue of house prices are already very high. We have a shortage of homes with which to people buy, and, you know, economics 101, supply and demand for here.
Well, should we look at the number of people coming here in terms of immigration? But anyway, that's a side point.
Well, quite. But if you, I don't know if they're buying homes, as it were, but if you make it easier, and look, this is the economics argument. I would love more first-time buyers to be able to buy properties, right? This is not... The economics argument is, what will happen is if you make it easier for people to buy property, then, of course, the demand falls, demand increases, so people want the property, but the supply stays the same. So house prices go up. So people have to save even more money. So those sort of increase of multiple of earnings will actually be null and void because you will need to have even more money. I mean, the amount of extra you have to buy a house from before the COVID pandemic is something like 90,000 on average. It's something outrageous. It's very difficult. If the government are really keen to look at the housing market and say, this is an area where we can boost growth, is one, obviously, you get the house builders building. Not just sitting on land, you get them building. And yes, difficult decisions may have to be made about where they're built. But also stamp duty is probably the most regressive tax going. It stops people moving. It's tens of thousands.
It also keeps you in a band, doesn't it? Because you try to buy within your band, because if you go over by a pound, you spend more in terms of stamp duty.
But, well, quite. But the reality is, you know, to buy a property, you are, and as first-time buyer, there are sort of certain, you know, advantages you can have up to a certain amount. You get it free. However, again, like I say, and this is not just targeted on the southeast and London, but there are particular problems in that region where house prices are high. But stamp duty for everyone is utterly regressive. It stops people moving, and we want a fluid economy. We want people to be moving around the country. And if you have a £20,000, let's say you're buying a £700,000 property or whatever, it's a lot of money, but say it's a home, you're looking at 20-odd thousand pounds of stamp duty, which is an enormous amount of money, which is just dead money. It's not going, it's not investing in your property, it's not doing anything. But every time you move, you have to pay it. So it's like, even if the house prices are going up, a lot of it's being eaten by such a regressive tax. Now, the other measures that the FCA are looking at, which I know you're particularly concerned about, is increasing the amount you can use contactless by, currently it's £100.
Yeah.
Over £100.
Originally it was £10.
Well, yeah, it was very it was very limited. I can't believe, I was looking at the dates. I think it was £10 in 2013 or something, and then 2015.
So not very long ago.
Oh God, that feels like ages ago.
But it wasn't that long ago.
But yes, but in America, for example, they don't have a limit on it, and I don't know because I don't have Apple, but I understand that doesn't really have a limit on it. So look, they're thinking about removing that spending limit. It allows firms and customers what they say is great.
Are you not worried about that? So if you have this contactless free limit, so someone nicks your card and off you go and have a lovely time in Selfridges?
Look, to be fair,
or
they could pretty much do that anyway. Some of the... And I worry generally about losing your phone. The amount of information that we have on our phones is absolutely extraordinary. But then I also worry about me flinging my card around, like, loosely. So
I've seen it.
I think, yeah, exactly. So I think, look, there are concerns. But I think, hopefully, if this is going to happen, we're going to tighten up security, two-step identification, face, etc. The other measure, which is quite interesting as well, that they are looking at is getting rid of mass compensation schemes. I don't know if you got any PPI, if you were part of that wave.
No, I looked and I didn't.
Me too.
I was really upset.
I got nothing, but lots of people got a lot of money. And of course, we're looking at this Car Finance Commission scandal at the moment, which banks, which they say would result in a combined £30 billion bill for lenders such as Lloyds and Santander. Now, last night it was sort of breaking news that Santander were looking at leaving the UK. This is big news, and one of the reasons cited was the fact that they're having to put a lot of money aside for these compensation scandals. Now, some people will argue, if you have done wrong, you should be compensated for it. But some of these things, especially the PPI, literally everyone to be compensated, there should be some quite serious detriment. Like, would you have not done it had? PPI, yes, but some of these car finance commissions, I'm not sure it would have made that much of a difference.
And also the solicitation from those companies saying, have you been involved in this and do you want to join our class action? For example, I'm just thinking about, if you have an IFA, an independent financial advisor, they have to see you once a year. Now, if they don't, are you that worried? Has it really been to your detriment? But there is a case that you can claim money. I'm not sure that's really right.
Look, I mean, that's a specific case, but and yes, let's look at it. But and that's actually quite simple for the IFAs to do, just to see you once a year, unless you're absolutely a horrible person, they don't want to see you at all. But so that's not hard. But things like this, it just means for banks. And look, I'm getting the small violin out here, but banks provide a very significant function in this. They drive a lot of the economy, etc. So to not know, and especially investors as well, to not know how much you really need to set aside. I mean, these bills were extraordinary.
They were.
So, look, that would be one thing. If I was the government, so what I would do if I wanted to get growth going, I would just... I'd look stamp duty particularly. I would look at the amount of money we've got in savings, cash ISAs, in cash, because that money could be used for investing. I don't know how we'd get that out, but that's worth investing. There's billions of pounds swilling around. And actually, people could be making their money work harder by investing.
I think also what the government has to do is to bring back confidence in the economy.
My final point, after saying that, what I would do is reform the tax system. I think it's really quirky, and especially things like the £100,000, it's discouraging people from wanting to earn more. And the final thing, and the most important thing, and the mistake I think that I've gone off on one, haven't I? But the mistake I think that Labour have made since the start was this miserabilism.
I agree.
Markets, economy. Our lives are built on sentiment. There is nothing good nor bad, but thinking makes it so. So I know, right? I just threw that little quote there.
That's
yeah.
very good.
But look, if you go around and say, "Oh, it's rubbish,"
Yeah,
honestly,
totally.
it's rubbish. Who is going to go?
But then,
all right, I'll give you some money.
So the juxtaposition is Blair in '97. Of course, he came into power and it was great and optimistic. And even if you didn't vote for him, you thought, well, at least the United Kingdom knows where it's going. But under this lot, you're right, and this is the front page of the Sunday Express this morning as well. Reeve's debt would fund 300,000 nurses. And they say the chaos unleashed by the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, would cost Britain the equivalent of 350,000 police constables' salaries or 300,000 nurses. I mean, you're right. If you are coming into power as a new government, as a power that hasn't been in power for a very long time, you need to sell what you're doing.
They came in on the crest of, I mean, I wouldn't say massive.
Apathy.
No, I disagree. I think that people were, yes, the Conservatives probably lost it rather than Labour won the election.
100%.
But people were ready for change. I think a lot of people, even if you didn't vote for Labour, were thinking, come on, no one can be that bad. This is time now to change. And you mentioned there about Tony Blair. I remember in my podcast that I do, This Is Money, it's a podcast, do listen to it.
Oh, do listen to it, it's very good.
It's out every Friday. But I quoted his speech that he gave to the Brighton conference, the first one he did, and it was full of, it's sort of Trump-esque almost. Let's make Britain great again. We may not be the biggest, but we can be the best. And I said, why not have a bit more of that? You massively underestimate and don't understand how economics, markets, anything work. You feel good, you act positively.
So that's a fascinating comment. When you look at Starmer, again, woe is me, and Rachel Reeves, woe is me.
Oh, he's Mr. Anti-charisma. There is no charisma.
I mean,
we need
a
a leader.
He's a middle manager, isn't he?
Yeah, we need
He's
someone that could have taken that zeitgeist for change and really run with it. But what did they do as soon as they came in? We have got this massive black hole, difficult decisions, etc., etc., and a lot of those decisions that they've made, the winter fuel allowance, for example, and we got the story yesterday about millionaires leaving the country. Economics is not an exact science, right? It's not maths. It's not,
No.
X plus Y. There are so many laws of unintended consequences. They need someone in government that can strategize, that can get up, to think about all the possible things that could happen as a result of the decisions that they've made, because it seems to me a lot of decisions will actually come back to bite them because they're not going to produce the money they think they are at all.
No. And there's another story linked to this, which is Kemi Badenoch. I mean, we said earlier, jokingly, where is she? What are her policies? Where's the leadership? Where's the vision? And I have to be slightly careful what I say, but Nigel Farage, whether you like him or you loathe him, what he does amazingly well is he galvanises an audience and he brings people with you. And it's a rare attribute, actually, in politicians. And I think that's what, across party, that's what all parties need to have. They need to have a visionary.
Look, yes and no. I think, and I don't want to use, the despots of the past, but the ones that because, you can be a popular, and I say populist here, you can be a very popular person and galvanise people and have some good measures. But the reality is that people look to those figures when things aren't going so well. If the economy was going wonderfully, you think people would care about the charisma of Sir Keir Starmer? No, I don't care. I don't need my politicians to be all singing, all dancing.
As long as they're competent, yeah.
As long as they're competent and they make good decisions, and I trust in those decisions. But at times when we don't trust them, that's when we look to leaders like, Nigel Farage or Donald Trump or Boris Johnson, if we want to go on every different side, I think that's the problem. We just need competent people, and we're seeing so many. I mean, I've got a story in front of me. Labour spares art students from the private school VAT rate. So gifted private school students from lower income households will not have to pay VAT if they're doing something like music or dance or something. It's a very small backtrack. It's a very small, however...
If they're doing music or dance?
Yeah, I wonder why not art, but, yeah, I know.
What about hard-working parents sending their kids to schools
music
when they're
and
doing
dance
47
schemes.
jobs to keep them?
Well, they're
anyway,
saying whose family earns
we could talk all day, but we have to go to a break. Lots still to come. I still want to talk about Sadiq Khan. We haven't got there yet either. Also, Donald Trump coming into power. Apparently, there's been a secret mini-cabinet meeting of Starmer and his fellow people trying to work out what on earth they do, given that Trump is coming into power. We'll talk about that also. I had this naughty maverick thought this morning. which person, it can be anyone in this country, who would you deport? This is based on Donald Trump actually deporting people from the United States. If you could, who would you deport from this country and why? Let me know. These are figures provided under Freedom of Information laws, shows that the proportion of offences, including child sexual offences, where no data on the ethnicity of convicted criminals that recorded has been trebled in the past 15 years. It's gone from 11.6% up to 28.7%. They are basically less likely to record the ethnicity of people convicted in those crimes. There is no other explanation, according to some people, than cultural sensitivity of police and other agencies.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back. This is Talk 7:30, Sunday, January the 19th. Lots of you getting in touch this morning. Thanks very much for these. Good morning, David. This is Sean in Gloucester, one of our regulars. Good morning to you, Sean. Georgie is wrong. No, I must slightly disagree. I'm sort of paraphrasing. I must slightly disagree with Georgie. She's right. Economics is not an exact science, but it's fairly basic. If taxes go up, people spend less, so growth doesn't happen. Rachel Thieves proves every day she should go back to customer complaints with her bad decisions. Shouldn't laugh. Now, this is... Who's this? Glenn, Stuart, Westerman. Kemi's best line at PMQs as of yet. We need a leader, not a lawyer. Sums up this government and its party, a gaggle of human rights lawyers and trade unionists. Sharon says, sorry to say, David, everything is miserable in the UK. Well, that's cheery. Now, this one, Georgie, why can't the banks let you set your own contactless payment limit? Also, contactless payments lead to inflation, in my view. No.
I'm pretty sure
Do
you...
they? No, it doesn't.
I mean...
Why would it?
I think, yeah, I'm not entirely convinced of that argument. However,
That's a polite way of saying no.
I think you can set your own limit with your bank.
Oh, can you? OK.
Yeah.
This, obviously, a very concerning comment. What a breath of fresh air Georgie is.
Oh, my goodness me.
Very concerning.
I mean, it is early in the morning, though.
It is very early, yes.
So maybe they've not had their coffee.
No, they haven't. But I did have coffee, and that got me thinking this morning, if you could deport any person, who would it be and why? My list is very long. 0344 499 1000, calls charged at the national rate. Text the word talk in your message to 87222. You can message us on X as well and send a WhatsApp message as well. Let's bring you the latest news on Gaza. So this ceasefire was due to come into effect an hour ago. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says the Gaza ceasefire will not go ahead until Hamas provides the names of the first hostages it plans to release. Now, Hamas says the reason they haven't released those names, we knew that this had to happen, and apparently they needed 24 hours to do that. Hamas says the delay is due to technical field reasons. As I say, they need to do that 24 hours before a planned exchange. Now, the Israeli military says it is now going to recommence its operation in Gaza as a result of that. We'll bring you the latest on that as and when we get it. I want to move on, if I can, and talk about this other story. Yesterday, I think pretty much every one of you was incensed by Sadiq Khan and the way he treated Susan Hall, who was the Conservative candidate for Mayor of London, and the way he treated Alex Wilson yesterday as well in the London Assembly. Oh, I showed you those clips, and, I mean, words fail me over the way he behaved. Now, Sadiq Khan has also taken to the papers this morning, front page of The Observer this morning. Khan warns of a march of fascism as Trump takes power again. So Sadiq Khan says the West must face up to a century-defining battle against a resurgent far right that is on the march across the developed world, according to Sadiq Khan. He says this is a march on the right in the US, in France and Germany. Stricter laws need to be introduced on harmful content, and it needs to happen to stem the tide. Now, he is basically railing against the idea that Giorgia Meloni and Eric Zemmour, a one-time French presidential candidate, apparently, according to this copy known for his xenophobia, will be in meeting for the inauguration of Trump, which happens tomorrow. He's taking aim at Elon Musk as well. He says that you're enabling hard-right materials to be shared across the world. Progressives across the Western world face a century-defining challenge, and the stakes for liberal democracy couldn't be higher. The hard right and far right are on the march. Wait for this. These are deeply worrying times, especially if you're a member of a minority community. And there is the punchline. Sadiq Khan, you are Mayor of London. You are not an international leader. Back in your box.
This language, I find...
It's inflammatory.
Rather extraordinary. But someone said, I was talking about this, about Trump being elected. And I said, if you cannot understand the reason why he was elected, you are part of the problem. He has some interesting views. He is right-wing. I wouldn't say any of the names you've mentioned there are far-right.
Neither would I.
And I hate the fact that we're using this language, far-right. It's not. But if you look at... if you are concerned about the rise of right-wing policies that are on the extreme side, the answer to it is not to use this sort of info, is to question, why do you think that's happened? Why do you think we're seeing, and it's not just America, we're seeing, you know, Justin Trudeau falling on his sword in Canada, we're seeing it across the world, because it is, and I think people have felt not listened to. There's been, and I use woke with inverted commas here, but, you know, there's been a woke agenda where people haven't felt, and I think this has been happening since, you know, before Brexit, and I think that's one of the reasons why people voted Brexit.
I would agree.
It's because for too long, legitimate concerns that people had about, say, immigration, for example, if you questioned it, you were racist. And we saw that language being used by Sir Keir Starmer last week when he completely misread the room and someone talked about rape gangs. And he said, if you are proliferating that language, then you are feeding into the far-right narrative, which, I mean, completely misses the point about young girls being targeted and abused and all that thing, and we should not be concerned about being called racist when that sort of crime is what we're talking about. But language like this and this lack of understanding of why people are fed up, why people are voting for... Well, I'll be honest with you, I don't think Donald Trump's very bright. I don't think he's...
Oh, I do.
I don't think he's very bright. I don't think he's a great leader. I think in terms of business, I think he reminds me of an 80s style business leader. I think it's that.
Is.
Yeah, and I think it's poor. I think we've moved on from that. I don't, Nigel Farage, I don't think he's proved himself as a leader of a country, so we don't know. But look, all I'll say is I don't think he's that great. I don't think he's that bright. However...
Who isn't bright? Nigel.
Trump. I don't think he's that great. But there's a reason that people went, I'm not going to vote for Kamala. I'm not going to vote for the status quo.
She looked like she was at sea most of the time.
Yes, I don't think she really knew what she was doing, but I think people were just deeply concerned about the way in which America was going, and I think people around the world are concerned. If you really care, Sadiq Khan, don't use language like this. Try to unify people. Try to listen. Work out what concerns people have. If you think immigration is a blanket good, explain it. But listen to people. Allow them to have that
if I was Mayor of London, I would say the advent of Donald Trump, of course, who's an Anglophile, this is a great opportunity for London, and this is what we need to do.
No, he doesn't have to...
Well, that's what I would have done.
Yes, but you're a different...
But you do that stuff through the back channels, and this is where people go wrong. By venting like this on the front page of The Observer, if I was American and I read that, I would be pretty livid. In fact, if I was any normal right-of-centre person in this country, I'd be pretty livid being called far-right.
But doesn't this just... to me, it's the Twitterification of politics.
Yeah.
And actually, it's funny because he's slamming Elon Musk there. But it is like, who are you appealing to? Are you trying to look cool? Is that what you're doing? You're trying to appeal to... but this is what I'm questioning. Are you trying to appeal to a certain section of your Londoners that you think that you understand? You don't understand. You don't understand people's views across Britain, because unless we address this, you will shoe in the far right.
And
we're not there yet, but we will.
The minute you leave London, you understand what people are thinking. That's what Sadiq Khan needs to do.
Yeah, and every politician as well. Every politician needs to walk outside of London and walk into different areas around the country and really figure out what people are thinking.
I just want to get on to this other story, which was written on a website which I happened to find. Secret UK mini cabinet tries to plan for unpredictable Trump, just keeping with that theme of Donald Trump, which I think is really interesting. Obviously, he's going to take the oath of office tomorrow. He'll become the most powerful man in the Western world. He will sign executive orders. Actually, there's another story this morning that I saw. 100 executive orders coming in tomorrow that I understand, because he's going to hit the ground running. There are secret mini cabinet meetings. Wait for this, the great and the good. Starmer, Reeves, Lammy, Jonathan Reynolds, which is obviously the best they can muster up, but they're trying to work out how do we position ourselves? And that is also predicated on the fact that it looks like Madelson's job is in doubt, which gave me a wry smile.
So I'll caveat what I said about Donald Trump's intelligence. I don't think he's intellectual.
Oh, no, I don't
What he is
he's bright.
Savvy.
Yeah, right.
He knows how to play people. He knows how to get under the skin of people, which in business is a really, really interesting quality to have. He ruffles feathers. And some people like that, some people don't like that. And I tell you what, Canada doesn't like that, Mexico doesn't like that, Panama doesn't like that, the UK doesn't like... Right, but I read an article, I think, in the EFT talking about him being a trickster. And that's the thing, he's come in and nobody quite knows what he's going to do. And so you can have all these mini cabinet meetings, but actually that's not where the magic needs to happen. The magic needs to happen over in the States with the conversations with Trump. If you really want to try and... you don't anticipate what he's going to do. You try and gear him into a different direction. And you do that by becoming friendly.
Well,
with
exactly.
him.
Now they're trying to work out, well, maybe we should send someone to the inauguration tomorrow. A, it's tomorrow, and B, the idea was David Lammy. I would suggest that's not a great idea.
It's an embarrassment. It is an embarrassment. I don't agree with your point that Sadiq Khan, for example, if you don't agree with something or don't agree with someone, and you don't want to go to an inauguration, for example, or you don't want to say, you know, Trump is this amazing person, then that's fine. But let's be British about this. If you've got nothing nice to say, don't say it at all, right? Come on, where is that good sense of British attitude?
I agree with you. I was brought up with that maxim, by the way. But
where did it go wrong?
Well, I'm breaking it because I'm deporting loads of people. Who would you deport? Why would you deport them? Let me know. This is Weekend Breakfast. Good morning.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back, 7:44 already, Sunday, January the 19th. Georgie, the time is flying. I keep promising to go through the front pages. Let's do that now. The Observer, this is it. We've been talking about this, the latest in Gaza. This is woefully out of date now. Fears of chaos in Gaza as families begin trek home after the ceasefire. The latest on that is the Gaza ceasefire has been delayed until Hamas releases the hostage list. 3 hostages, they have to be named 24 hours in advance of that ceasefire ending. The IDF now saying they're going to resume their military operations. That's the front page of The Observer. If you get a chance, do read that. Sadiq Khan. Khan warns of march of fascism as Trump takes power again. It will make your mouth drop open reading that. Let's move on to the Sunday Times. This is a complicated story, and Georgie reminded me I actually missed the punchline of this story earlier. Attorney General in row over Chagos refugees. This is the Attorney General, Lord Hermer. Essentially, he was working for some people who had landed on the Chagos Islands, who tried to claim asylum in this country. It was denied by the Supreme Court. Then, when he became Attorney General, guess what? They were allowed into Britain. And the punchline, Georgie, which I'll let you deliver...
We used to work at the same chambers as Sakir, so it's a jobs for the boys, isn't it? I'm just questioning. It made me think of that. I'm not saying
just
anything.
Randomly.
It's
just randomly.
Pure coincidence.
Also, this big story as well, which is the bottom. Trump is going to start deportations on day one. This is going to be fascinating to see, actually. Donald Trump is going to start deporting illegal migrants on the first day, tomorrow, in mass raids on sanctuary cities. They're going to descend on Chicago, left-leaning cities in a big raid. I imagine LA is right at the top of that list as well. He has told Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE, to go Go arrest criminal aliens. Which will start on day one. That will be a lesson to the government of the United Kingdom. This is a story we've been talking about this morning. Team Trump's revenge on Starmer for meddling in the US election. They said, right, well, you sent people over here to try and get Kamala Harris elected, so guess what we're going to do? We're going to work with Nigel Farage. We're going to make him Prime Minister. And that is the front page of the Mail. Also, I have to just point out, Sophie is 60.
She looks great, doesn't she?
She looks great.
I remember when she
like
first
her.
came in and the PR scandal and she was a bit of, marrying Edward.
Can I
and all
name
that.
drop?
Oh, goodness me. Let me get the Hoover out.
I had dinner with her.
Is she as nice as she seems?
Yeah, she's super nice.
Good,
she's super nice.
Because she seems a nice, sturdy rock of the royal family.
No, she's actually very... I don't know if I can say what I was going to say. She was very good company.
Yeah, she likes a drink.
She was very good company. It was very good company. Now look, I've completely lost myself. So I've done the Telegraph and the Mail. Shall we move on? We mentioned this story as well, the Sunday Express. Reeves' debt would fund 300,000 nurses. This is Georgie's point, saying, look, you're not optimistic. You've taught the country down. No wonder everyone isn't spending any money. Front page of the Mirror. I totally get this. The new normal in the NHS. This is like a third world country. Desperate patients crammed in on trolleys waiting for A&E treatment. This is Di Davis, who works at Epsom. Just said this is the new normal. One of the things I was thinking about when I read this morning, and having worked in A&E departments, what people don't really understand is not just the pressure. You can't move. There are people everywhere. It's boiling hot. The medics are running around pulling their hair out. The nurses don't know what to do because there is no space. And the lack of dignity for patients who are stuck in trial. I mean, those stories, it's just unacceptable that people are dying on trolleys in a corridor with no privacy.
They don't call it corridors anymore, do they? They call it temporary space, something.
It's a corridor.
Yeah, I know.
I mean, it's just and now they're putting in oxygen points in the corridor.
Sadly, I don't think this is going to get any better. And what we're seeing is cases where people who've had cancer diagnoses and had to wait on a long waiting list are suing, so they're probably going to get some money. It's going to, bankrupt the country even more, and we still not are sorting out the crisis that we've got in the NHS.
And the crisis in social care as well.
It's one thing to lose your life and all that sort of thing. It's one thing to be in hospital, but there's also that added level of the indignity of being on a corridor.
And you wonder why, when I speak to all my friends who are doctors or nurses, pretty much all of them are leaving. Pretty much.
Which is the last thing we need. The absolute last thing we need. So what are we?
We're 55. So they're really in their prime now. They're consultants. And they just say, I can't work in this country anymore. Front page of The Sun, Gladiator cop probe over woman stalker. This is Apollo, the TV gladiator, real name Alex Gray, 33, was harassed on set and at his Sheffield digs. Oh, right. Sunday People. Sunday People. This is about Linda Nolan, actually. Linda was an entertainer to the end. Denise Nolan said her sister was laughing and joking with the medics in the final hour. And my favourite story of the day, as always, the Daily Star never fails to impress, right?
Yeah.
The orange man baby, Donald Trump, is a zombie. A whole load of completely sensible Brits are convinced President-elect Donald Trump is actually a brain-munching member of the living dead. Turns to page 7.
I like that statistical number of a whole load. Nice. I might borrow that.
I just got to finish this. Apparently, 1 in 25 of us reckons the orange man baby who's going to be president is either a zombie or a hologram created by the CIA. More on that and all the big stories after this break. This is Weekend Breakfast. Good morning. These are figures provided under Freedom of Information laws, shows that the proportion of offences, including child sexual offences, where no data on the ethnicity of convicted criminals recorded has been trebled in the past 15 years. It's gone from 11.6% up to 28.7%. They are basically less likely to record the ethnicity of people convicted in those crimes. There is no other explanation, according to some people, than cultural sensitivity of police and other agencies.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
This is Talk. Georgie Frost with me this morning. I thought we should just talk about this, about AI, the rise of AI. Normally we have Tech Review, Tech Rundown, but Davis Fang is away. This is a really sad story. A woman duped into handing over £700,000 to a scammer who used AI to pose as Brad Pitt is now suffering from severe depression. She is now homeless, penniless and living with a friend as she desperately tries to recover her money. Her name is Anne, according to the Daily Mail. Apparently, she's really... So the story in itself is absolutely terrible, but because everyone then piled in and said she was really stupid, that's obviously affected her mental health. But you can see... It's that seeding, isn't it? And the fact is, you know, they start you on this journey, you think you're talking to someone who isn't real. And look, I understand that many people will be rolling their eyes, and she thought she was having a relationship with Brad Pitt. But the photos came, the photos obviously were AI generated, she fell for it. She then gave money for an operation which didn't take place and so on.
Look, I mean... So the difficulty with this is, have you seen the photographs of the Brad Pitt?
Apparently they're terrible.
Anyone looking at them would be like,
Right.
are you, this is the worst sort of... But you're right, this does represent a much bigger, more significant story. Now, I understand Anne at the time was going through a divorce, and that money was her divorce settlement.
Yeah, that's right.
Which, I've not been through a divorce, thankfully, though I know plenty of people who have. It is not, as I understand it, the most emotionally stable time.
No, of course
it can be a very difficult time for you anyway, so you are more vulnerable. And where scammers, and they proliferate everywhere, really hook people is when you're at a time where you're vulnerable. And that could be you've had a, you know, divorce or breakup or whatever, or it could just be you're busy, you're a mother, you know, or a father, you're working very hard, you don't have time to check these things. We see this all the time with financial scammers. And sadly, dating scammers are just the worst because they touch on something, you know, your emotion. And I have been approached by a lot of people who say that they are someone else, someone who's actually a TalkSport presenter, who's not TalkSport. But this was years ago, and I was like, are you sure? Someone else who apparently said that they were a England rugby player, and I was like, yes, but you spelt your name wrong. But luckily, I'm a cynical person, so I didn't fall for them. But I can understand why people, you know, do get into this. It's an amazing I think it's a Netflix story about a woman who gets catfished, and you know, you're looking at it and you're thinking no, but then it transpires that she's in her late 30s, she's desperate for a baby, this is her last chance, she's committed to it, and that's the thing, you know, they hook you in. And so look, the bigger issue with that is that these people are awful. They will hook the most vulnerable people in a romance scam. I mean, you absolute charlatans for doing that, you know. So while I look at the photos and go, are you kidding me? How did you think that was Brad Pitt? I do think that this is something that actually, you know, people could fall prey to, you know. And I just think, I've got no advice on this other than just be cautious. And what you see online is, you know, and actually there's a really interesting story, and I don't really have time to go into it, but in the Times today which relates to TikTok, a teacher who...
Which has gone dark.
Yes, exactly. A teacher who door-knocked for Labour was forced into hiding. She's pregnant over a racist deepfake. Basically, she was handing out leaflets and someone had touched up the filming and said that she'd said some horrible racial slur. She hadn't. She lost her job. She got such abuse. You know, it can destroy people's lives. All this sort of technology and the AI and all this sort of thing. So, as I say, it's just, you know, be extra cautious, but
also, how do you disentangle that? If you start seeing political adverts or you see a politician say something or purport to say something which they haven't actually said, and it's all been AI generated, how on earth do you disentangle that?
I don't think we've even touched on what this could be like. And I think the fact that Facebook said they're getting rid of their content moderators and all that, which part of me goes, OK, that's not a bad thing, because they didn't show women with mastectomy scars, which I think is outrageous, or breastfeeding women. However, I do think we need something, because this technology, this particularly Gen AI, we're at the cusp of what it can do. But my goodness me, what it will have the power to do eventually, I can't even imagine. And these, you know, deep fakes, these, you know, doctored photos, it can doctor your voice. And think about you and I, our voices all over the internet. It would be so easy. All over. So easy to take our voices, to call my mum, etc. So, like I said, the most important thing is, yes, to be vigilant. The second is, if you have been scammed, don't bury your head in the sand. Don't be ashamed. You are not foolish. You are not foolish. So it's get help, particularly with financial scams. Speak to your bank immediately. Contact, you know, those organisations. The police, absolutely. There's organisations that can help you. So please, please speak to a friend as well. If you think something doesn't sit right, trust your gut instinct. Because I hate to say it, at some stage in our lives, we will all be a victim of scam.
Georgie, it has been...
Sorry, that wasn't a very positive end, was it?
It's been such a pleasure to have you as well. I hope you get some sleep, because I know you've been jetting around the world. Georgie, thanks ever so much for coming in. Georgie Frost there. Right, still loads to come on the programme. After the break, I'm going to be talking to John Boothman, political correspondent, about who's had a good week, who's had a bad week, and who should have a week off. Yes, this is Weekend Breakfast.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Hello, a very good morning to you just after 8 o'clock. 8 o'clock already on Sunday, January the 19th. I'm David Bull. This is Weekend Breakfast. It's the weekend, yeah. That means it's great news. Yes, today is Tin Can Day, a day to honour the humble object which was invented in the early 1800s by a French inventor called Philippe-Henri de Gérard. Yeah, bien sûr. It revolutionised the military in the world of exploration. The reason for that was soldiers and explorers could now travel long distances without worrying about the shelf life of their food. How clever. Yeah. Also, today it's National Popcorn Day, a day that celebrates the versatile taste and the fun that it brings to you when you're in the cinema and throwing it all around the place. Now, you can take your choice. You can have butter and salt, you can have caramel or maybe even cheese. And today is also Brewer Potion Day, a day where you put on your witch hat, you make your own magical concoctions, of course, which have been made very famous by the likes of Harry Potter. Now, you can make your potion to make you immortal, to make you cure disease, or maybe fall in love. Make that potion!
And my potion, my beautiful potion.
My potion! Right, let's move on to today's fascinating facts.
Today's fascinating facts.
Now, some new ones for you this hour. On this day in 2013, a piece of music that was composed by waiting for bird droppings to fall onto giant sheets of manuscript paper received its premiere. Yeah, at the Tate Liverpool Art Gallery. The artist, Kerry Morrison, said the music represented the role that birds play in our environment. On this day in 2014, the death of former British athlete Sir Chris Chataway. He died at the age of 82. He broke the 5,000-metre world record in 1954. He's remembered as the man who helped pace Sir Roger Bannister, by the way, who was a doctor and trained at St Mary's Hospital up the road where I trained, to break the 4-minute mile barrier in the same year. And you'll remember this one, of course. On this day in 2024, Indian-owned Tata Steel confirmed it was cutting 2,800 jobs across the UK and closing both blast furnaces in Port Talbot in South Wales. Most of the job losses were expected to be in Port Talbot, that employs 4,000 workers. The furnaces, these two blast furnaces, will be replaced by an electric arc furnace, which produces less CO2, requires fewer workers to maintain, and in my humble opinion, completely bonkers. And those are today's fascinating facts. Well, a very good morning to you. It's a very fast-paced morning. It's now 8 o'clock. The latest, the front page of The Observer, everyone was looking at the ceasefire that was coming into effect in Gaza, which was due to start at 8:30 this morning. Fears of chaos in Gaza as families begin their trek home after the ceasefire. The latest is Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says the Gaza ceasefire will not go ahead until Hamas provides the names of the first hostages it plans to release. Now, the deal was those 3 hostages had to be named at least 24 hours before that ceasefire began. They haven't done that. Hamas, and this has changed, now says the delay is down to a technical field reason, whatever that means. So, as I say, that ceasefire was due to come into effect an hour and a half ago. It hasn't come into effect. The more worrying statement, though, from the IDF this morning was Daniel Hagari saying that actually they will now resume its military operations. The latest news coming out of Gaza is now that Israel has resumed its strikes, 8 people, and this is what I was talking to Georgie Frost about. In this time, since we've been on air, 8 people have been killed by Israeli airstrikes in Gaza. And obviously that ceasefire was due to be in effect. 5 were killed in Gaza City, 3 in the north, 25 more were wounded. Plumes of smoke can now be seen across Gaza as the strikes have been carried out. I'll bring you more on that as and when we get it this morning. There's a lot of politics in the papers this morning as well. Let me just tell you this one. I was talking to Georgie about the fact that the government is panicking about Trump coming into power tomorrow. Of course, his inauguration is tomorrow. It's noticeable that the UK has no representative at that inauguration at all. So the government is now trying to work out what on earth it does. There are talks and rumours that David Lammy is going to be dispatched to Washington. I don't think that will happen, but who knows. The Mail, now this is a really interesting headline this morning. Team Trump's revenge on Starmer for meddling in the US election. So the story here is that members of Donald Trump's White House team are really rather angry that Keir Starmer tried to meddle in the US election by sending people to campaign on behalf of Kamala Harris. So in response, they're now saying, right, we are going to campaign for Nigel Farage in the United Kingdom to become Prime Minister. So they're also saying that Keir Starmer now has to go to the back of the queue of the world leaders, and they say that, right, their Prime Minister is going to have to eat humble pie if you want a speedy visit to the White House. Revenge is a dish best served cold. There's another great story this morning. Sunday Times, front page. Is Mandelson now at risk of MAGA? I saw this late last night, and so Peter Mandelson is the UK's ambassador to, or the incoming UK's ambassador to the US, but members of Donald Trump's White House team are working with Reform. They say that actually the new president is going to signal his displeasure by saying, no, I don't want Peter Mandelson. Now, this morning, people said to me, well, now the US is meddling in UK political issues, but that's not true, because the UK's ambassador to the US has to be approved by the president. And if Trump doesn't want Mandelson, and I can see why that is, then he will not allow him to be UK ambassador, which is, again, another thump in the face for Keir Starmer and the government as well. The Attorney General also in trouble over the Chagos Islands and the legal advice that he delivered before he became Attorney General, and also what he did once he became Attorney General. That's worth a read there. And then I just have to mention this because it is so horrific. The Mirror, Sunday Mirror, the new normal in the NHS. Excuse me. Desperate patients crammed in onto trolleys waiting for A&E treatment, the NHS falling apart. Di Davis from Epsom said, you look at this, it's not the level of care, excuse me, that I would want for my family. Other doctors are saying this is the new normal. I mean, it's just on a human level, just horrific. Patients, particularly elderly patients, being treated in corridors, no privacy, nurses unable to cope, doctors unable to cope. The other thing that I think it's worth just saying is I just totally feel for the clinical staff, because it's just impossible to do anything. You can't move, it's boiling hot, you've got patients everywhere, you can't deliver good care. And the idea that this is somehow the new normal is absolutely horrific. So we will keep you up to date with all of those. Lots of you getting in touch as well this morning. Sharon, this is very sweet of you. Dr. Bull, I must say I do look forward to your show at the weekend. You certainly are a breath of fresh air. That's very lovely. Thank you very much indeed. Now, I'm also in a slightly naughty mood this morning because Donald Trump, he says, and this is the copy that has come out of the United States, raids to detain and deport migrants living in the US without permission are set to begin on the first day tomorrow. So basically, they're going to deport illegal migrants immediately tomorrow from the United States. And that got me thinking, right, if you were in a position of power here in the UK, who would you deport and why? Let me know. My list is very long. 0344 499 1000. Calls charged at the national rate. Text the word talk in your message to 87222. You can message on X as well. You can send a WhatsApp note as well. Do get in touch, please, and let me know. If you could deport anyone, who would it be? It can be anyone. I've heard about ex-husbands, lots of politicians being mentioned. Who would it be if you could deport someone, and why? I want to turn my attention now to a week in politics, and joining me now, John Boothman, political correspondent at the Sunday Times in Scotland. Good morning, John.
How are you, David?
I'm all right, thank you very much indeed. I mean, politically, it's so fascinating, those big headlines this morning, the US exacting revenge on Starmer's government, their secret weapon, David Lammy. That worries me extraordinarily. And also, just in terms of that, Nigel Farage loving this over in the United States. Now, I had an idea that for this section, what we should do is to look at who's had a good week, who's had a bad week, who should have a week off. So let's start with a good week. Who's had a good week?
Look, it hasn't even started yet, and there's Donald Trump, the world's famous Scotsman, I always call him. He's going to swear on the Bible given to him by his Scottish mother, his oath of allegiance tomorrow. But, you know, he's not started. And do you know what? We're all Trumpians now. And if we're not, we're dancing to his tune. Internal opposition in America has evaporated in his own party. The Democrats are muted. Internationally, you know, I heard the hostage parent, sad story this morning, Israeli hostage parent, thanking not Joe Biden, but Donald Trump for the deal that's not quite happened yet. Absolutely astonishing. And as you say, tomorrow we'll get a big blizzard of executive orders. We'll get that migration, deportations you've talked about. There'll be stuff in the economy. And yeah, you're absolutely right. Keir Starmer should be worried. The Mandelson story you've mentioned. We've got the prospect of tariffs. Now, I'm sitting here in Scotland. Our favourite national drink, whiskey, might be subject to tariffs. One of our biggest exports, salmon, might be subject to tariffs. There's concerns about the whole country, the UK, and defence spending, it not being high enough. Where are we going to find the money for that? Worrying times for the UK government with Trump being in office. But you know what? We're all on his side now, or if we're not, we better get into line.
We were talking about this. The fact is that Keir Starmer came into office. They talked, Georgie was saying in a very erudite manner, talking about that Starmer and Reeves had talked down the British economy. Oh, it's woe is me, and we got 20 billion hole, fixing the foundations, working people, blah, blah, blah. The thing that Trump has done, and very successfully, is he's galvanised the people of America. He's going to make America great again. This is what I'm going to do. This is how you win at politics. You build from the grassroots. You say, right, this is the vision. This is what I'm going to do. And look, it's worked.
Look, you know, you can't talk about jam tomorrow if jam tomorrow is going to be in 10 years' time. And that's the big mistake that Starmer's actually made, I think. You know, people need hope. They need something to cling on to. The other thing that I find absolutely fascinating is how Trump has managed and does talk the language of ordinary Americans. Ordinary Americans, when you speak to them, they talk in the way that he talks. He's captured the language. We know what his agenda is. It's simple. It's straightforward. You know, who can remember even now anything that Kamala Harris stood for? And, you know, somehow or other, you know, British politicians, certainly those in all of the mainstream political parties, seem way behind and way out of step with people in the country.
Just looking at this, I mean, it is fascinating, the power dynamics that are going on. Team Trump's revenge on Starmer for meddling in the US election. Of course, he sent people over to campaign for Kamala Harris. He's now saying, right, OK, I'm going to exact my revenge. I'm going to campaign for Nigel Farage. There will be some very worried faces in number 10 today.
I'm struck both in Scotland and across the UK, not just in number 10, but in the Conservatives, about how no one has a strategy to combat Nigel Farage. No one will know how to cope or knows how to cope with these kind of things that are being talked about, round about Elon Musk, round about Trump, and certainly not, you know, in electoral terms. We've got an election. You've got an election in England, council elections coming up in May. And if Reform make great progress there, that's a big platform moving on to, and this is where I have a big interest in, the Scottish and Welsh elections next year. Now, Reform has taken off in Scotland, not in the same way as it's taken off in England and in Wales, but do you know what? They're doing pretty well. They could be the kingmakers about who's in the government in Scotland after the elections in 2026.
So Donald Trump, you say you're nominating him as the person who's had the best week. I would have said Nigel Farage is having a pretty good week as well.
I don't disagree with any of that. You know what? Nigel Farage actually doesn't need to do anything very much, and he'll have a good week because all of the things that have happened off the ineptitude of the Starmer government, the crazy decisions that they appear to have taken, which have really hacked off big sections of the electorate. Old people in particular. Now, old people were always the bedrock of Labour support, and all of that seems to have gone. And as I say, Nigel Farage is picking up support from everywhere. You focused an awful lot on what it means for the Tories, but actually this is very bad news for Labour as well.
OK, so who's had a bad week?
Well, you know, I couldn't help but think about what was happening where I live. Now, there's always a great interest in Nicola Sturgeon. It's nearly 2 years since she left office, and last week, 2 years, February 2023.
Wow, that's flown.
Sturgeon. And you know what? There's still a lot of interest in her. Last week, she announced that she was divorcing her husband, Peter Murrell, of 14 years. They've been together for 20 years. All of this, of course, on the back of, the situation the SNP still faces, a big dark shadow over the top of them about the police investigation into their finances. It emerged yesterday in the papers that the house that they live in, her husband, Peter Murrell, can't sell it. Can't get out loans in it because of restrictions put in place by the Crown relating to the embezzlement charges that he still faces. And of course, Nicola Sturgeon, despite the fact, as I say, that she continues to protest her innocence, she's still part of that investigation by the police as well.
Were you surprised with that announcement about the divorce?
No, not really. I mean, you know... Look, Nicola Sturgeon and Peter Murrell have been together, as I say, nearly 20 years, but it's kind of been an open secret. They live together in the same house, but, you know, nobody was surprised by this announcement. You know, she seems to be staying part of the week in Edinburgh in a house owned by Val McDermid, the crime writer. She then stays, she still says they're living together in the same roof in this house in Uddingston in Glasgow. But do you know what? Nobody was really much surprised about it. The other thing that's around, of course, is that, you know, although she remains a member of the Scottish Parliament, there's been an awful lot of criticism about a lack of attendance there. Poor attendance there. She hardly ever contributes in debates, and at the same time she's set up a private company now, set that up September, I think, 2023, in order to put her outside earnings in. She's already had, I think, 75,000 in the first of 4 payments of that level for an autobiography that's coming out later this year. She's making other earnings from book reviews and various other things. So it's an interesting time, an interesting period. But as I say, there's huge interest still, it appears, not just in Scotland but across the UK, on what happens next with Nicola Sturgeon. Will she stand? Will she not stand in the next Scottish elections? We suspect she won't. But anyway, as I say, she's had a hell of a week.
She's had a hell of a week, you're right. Which politician should we keep an eye on this week?
Look, we've seen it all morning already. We need to keep an eye on what Bibi Netanyahu does, the Prime Minister of Israel. Let's hope this ceasefire actually starts and holds, but we need to be careful in seeing how he reacts. He's in a difficult situation inside his own cabinet. One cabinet member's already resigned. That he's not exactly popular with huge swathes of opinion in Israel. Now that Donald Trump comes in, you know, there will be a rapport between Trump and him. Let's watch what happens, not just in Gaza. Let's see what happens in the forthcoming period in Iran, for example. There's all other places where we need to keep our eye on, like Lebanon and Yemen as well. So I think the critical person in all of this and how he reacts, and as I say, let's hope they can get that ceasefire underway today and as early as possible. Let's see the release of those hostages. That's key to all of it. Let's see those aid trucks getting into Gaza, but how Netanyahu reacts to all this, particularly given the domestic political situation he faces, is really important.
Yeah, I would agree. Let's finally, your nomination, please, for a politician who should have the week off.
look, I'm fed up hearing the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, telling us about that jam tomorrow.
Oh, she makes her own lunch, John. She packs her lunch, she puts it in her Tupperware. And
Well,
she nicks the pastries. She nicks pastries and sticks it in there.
Well, that's cool, right? And good for her. I just want her to take a week off and maybe try and sort some of this stuff out. You know, we've got big issues in this country, not just in terms of all those borrowing costs that we're talking about, the prospect of more public expenditure cuts coming. You know, if you're an employer in this country, there's a lot of talk about what it might mean, and it hasn't happened yet. Come the beginning of April, this is going to be a big blow. Those national insurance employer contributions, you know, all of the increases that are coming as a result of the national living wage and the national minimum wage, this is going to hit businesses hard, and it's the complete antithesis of, you know, what she says is her first mission, to promote economic growth in this country. And this is not a good period the country is going through. She herself might be in danger if those elections that we were talking about in May don't go Labour's way. So, again, it's something worth watching, but I just want to go away, hide behind the sofa, go and hide under the desk. She can take her Tupperware dish with her as well, and her pastries, and try and work out where we're going next.
Brilliant. Such a pleasure, John. Really good to talk to you this morning. John Boothman, political correspondent at the Sunday Times in Scotland. That got me thinking this morning. If you could deport anyone at all, if you had the power, who would you deport from this country, and why would you deport them? The number 0344 499 1000. Text the word talk in your message to 87222. There's some fantastic messages coming in. And message us on X as well, at talkTV. We'll take a break now. After the break, it's our Future Politics panel. Joining me this morning, Jonas Dean, who's a political commentator, and Oliver Dean, who is a political commentator with Young Voices UK. That's all still to come. This is Weekend Breakfast. Good morning. These are figures provided under Freedom of Information laws, shows that the proportion of offences, including child sexual offences, where no data on the ethnicity of convicted criminals that recorded has been trebled in the past 15 years. It's gone from 11.6% up to 28.7%. They are basically less likely to record the ethnicity of people convicted in those crimes. There is no other explanation, according to some people, than cultural sensitivity of police and other agencies.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back. This is Talk 8:27, Sunday, January the 19th. Right. We were talking just before the break about who's having a good week, who's having a bad week, who should have a week off. Rachel Reeves should have a week off, according to John. Pack up those pastries in a Tupperware box, and off she goes and toddles and thinks about how she's going to get the United Kingdom out of the mess that it's in. If you are just waking up this morning, there's some really interesting stories. Of course, Donald Trump coming into power tomorrow in that inauguration ceremony. Lots of events taking place in the United States. I think it is noticeable there is no UK representation at the inauguration. That's normal, but it kind of jars when you see that people like Boris Johnson are there, Liz Truss is there, Nigel Farage is there, Tobias Ellwood is there, lots of other politicians are there at the inauguration. Trump has also said he's going to hit the ground running. Now, he says he's going to deport people on day one of his presidency. Raids to detain and deport migrants living in the United States without permission will begin tomorrow, according to CBS. That's a news operation in the UK. There is a border czar called Tom Homan. He says it will start in Chicago. It will be ground zero for mass deportations. We shall see. The Daily Mail also talking about revenge against Starmer, which is going to be levied by President Trump. Lots to talk about, and that brings me nicely to the Future Politics panel.
The Future Politics panel.
Well, joining me this morning, two Deans. Jonas Dean, political commentator, and Oliver Dean, political commentator with Young Voices UK. Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning.
How are you both?
Not too bad. Yourself?
Yeah, all right, thank you very much. I mean, what do you make of the political situation currently? I mean, there's so much going on, not just domestically, but internationally as well.
Well, I'd say, you know, if we're looking internationally, we've got Trump's inauguration.
We have
tomorrow.
It's a big gig,
and it is a big gig. And
yeah.
I think you were just saying there, you know, we've got a lot of UK politicians going over to the inauguration, and I think it's quite worrying as well that we've seen the relationship that Keir Starmer has had with Trump previously, the comments that he's made, and we saw as well in the US election with Labour aides going over to aid the Democrats against Trump. I think it's quite worrying in terms of the relationship and the dynamic that we're going to see between Keir Starmer and Donald Trump for the next 4 years.
What do you think?
Good morning. Thank you.
Morning.
Thank you for having me. Just before we start, there is intrigue about everything, but I want to take a second to say that I, like everyone, hope that the hostage crisis comes to an end.
The reason I didn't really want to start talking about that in this particular section is I think everyone is on the same side, that actually what we're hoping for is the ceasefire does start at some point. I mean, just since you bring it up, I mean, the tragedy that Israel has started again on their military operation, as they're calling it, and that people have died in the last hour. I mean, that should have started 2 hours ago. But, you know, rather than take political sides, I think, you know, everyone just hopes the ceasefire is enacted.
And I just wanted to raise that before. And it comes to the point that today, before Trump has taken office, the world is starting to change and people are looking with intrigue.
So let me just ask you, the prospect of this ceasefire, since you bring it up, how much of this do you think is down to Trump leveraging or saying to Netanyahu, sort this out?
Well, look, there's a new administration coming in on January 20th, and the ceasefire has been broken on January 19th. I don't think that's a coincidence.
No, I don't.
However critical I am of many of Trump's policies, he said that all hell will break loose if it isn't resolved, whatever that means. It's obvious that there is a connection, and things are changing today.
Yeah, they are, very much so. And just to bring you the latest on that, the ceasefire has been delayed until Hamas actually releases the names of those hostages. That was the latest, slightly earlier on. Benjamin Netanyahu says the Gaza ceasefire will not go ahead until Hamas provides the names of those first 3 hostages. As I said, they have to be released 24 hours before a ceasefire begins. Israel has now resumed their military action, and as I said, this is really prolonging the agony for those who are caught up in that, and we'll bring you more on that as and where we can. let's just move back to Donald Trump, the inauguration. But obviously that has relevance, and he has pushed Netanyahu. I think that's pretty obvious. Your thoughts?
So Labour is in a precarious position because the Trump administration coming in tomorrow is not the same Trump administration that came in 2016. Twitter has come back to bite everyone from the Labour Party, and there's been this very popularised distrust or dislike between the two administrations. Diplomacy will be very difficult under Trump, and that's because not just the UK, but all elements of geopolitics and diplomacy, as we know, it seems to be keeling to the fact that no one knows what the hell he's going to...
Why is diplomacy going to be difficult?
Well, diplomacy is going to be difficult because the special relationship doesn't seem like it applies the same way under a Trump presidency. It's not about
doesn't it apply under Starmer's Britain?
I don't think it applies under a Trump presidency because it's not about what can we do for each other, it's about how do things work for America. And that applies in all aspects of Trump's leadership.
Your thoughts?
I would say... I mean, we've seen with senior Trump aides and people close to Trump trying to back Nigel Farage for Prime Minister in the next general election.
Yeah, it's front page.
Yeah, it seems as though Trump's team is, as the Daily Mail said, trying to get revenge on Keir Starmer for...
Well, I mean, it was blinking stupid, wasn't it, for Starmer to intervene or try to intervene to get Kamala Harris elected. Hang on a minute, wait. No. But from, you know, and this is the headline this morning, so Team Trump are basically saying, right, you interfered with us, we're now going to get Nigel Farage elected.
No, and I think it was a diplomatic misstep from Keir Starmer to come out and do that, especially when you are the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, because no matter...
The closest ally to the United States.
The closest ally, and, you know, the US election was always going to be basically a coin toss, and so to gamble potential trading partnerships with the US all on, you know, whether you're going to back Kamala Harris or Donald Trump was very risky. And now we're going to see, you know, with Trump saying that he might implement tariffs on UK goods. UK consumers...
Well, he's saying tariffs across the board to it, which is your point,
yeah.
Which is to any third country.
But it's worrying for British people and British consumers if we're going to suffer as a result of Keir Starmer's missteps.
Sorry, you were going to say?
So, just to correct the records, there was no concerted effort from the Labour Party to campaign for Kamala Harris. What there was a member of the...
I'm just looking quizzically at you at that point.
What there was... No, because it was investigated. It was investigated by the Electoral Commission. And not only was it not illegal, it also wasn't true. There was a LinkedIn post from someone who worked in the Labour Party...
Well, Trump obviously thinks it's true.
Well, I'm not sure that's the barometer for truth. But it's like I'm sure all elections always, there have been, I'm sure with Conservatives, there have been people that went over to campaign during the election, and it wasn't a party initiative in any way. And you can tell that in part because Keir has changed his message.
But hang on a minute.
If I could just finish the point also,
yeah.
Your discussion here about the special relationship is very evident, because if there was such a special relationship, then for there to already be such a fraction between the leadership of America and any sort of direction that Britain starts to take undermines the idea of this non-negotiable special relationship, this we trust each other and diplomacy behind closed doors.
Let's make this very clear. There is a special relationship, but America will always be put first by Donald Trump. And actually, I think that's the right thing.
Well, no, exactly. Well, I agree with that, and that's my point before.
So just in terms of that, I was asking John earlier who's had a good week, who's had a bad week. It seems to me Nigel Farage is loving it. He's out there. He's been talking to veterans. He's been doing all sorts of things. That, I think, and I'm being careful, but that is again another problem for Starmer.
No, absolutely, and it seems as though Keir Starmer is facing problem after problem, with Reformer rising in the polls. Farage is soaring in popularity, and the more Keir Starmer is in office, the longer he's in office, it seems as though every opportunity he's making mistakes, he's making errors, and it looks as though he's going to suffer the consequences for that in the next general election.
It's a problem, isn't it? Nigel Farage is a problem for Starmer.
Nigel Farage is a problem for Starmer and for Kemi Badenoch. It's look, so far Nigel Farage has been a very good MP for Washington DC, but it's not without difficulty for him. We saw what happened with Elon Musk the other day.
Yeah.
there is this thing that's going on where the Trump administration is impenetrable to criticism. It's for meddling like this from another country in British politics is, I think, unprecedented, especially with the special relationship. Look, it's obviously a relationship for Starmer, and the question is there a way to be pragmatic, to leverage it and to build bridges?
OK, let me ask you that question after the break, though. I do have to go to a break. Thank you very much for the moment, gentlemen. We'll continue with our Future Politics panel after this break.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back. Weekend Breakfast with David Bill, 8:40. 8:40? Sunday, January. It's flown by. Sunday, January the 19th. I'm in the middle of our Future Politics panel with Jonas Dean, political commentator, and Oliver Dean, political commentator with Young Voices UK. Now, where did we get to? Because we were talking about, obviously, what's going on in the United States. I'm just so intrigued about tomorrow. Of course, they've moved it inside because the weather is... Someone said on Twitter, oh, they're just being wet and they should carry on outside. I mean, it's -5. And I think it's more about older people being outside, and obviously you can't have that. So Donald Trump is obviously going, and your point is really valid, which is I think he's going to rewrite global kind of politics. I'm you know, it will be fascinating to see where we are. Nigel Farage, we were just talking about this. He is rather loving it over there. He attended a lunch for military veterans with Pete Hegseth, who's the US Defence Secretary. This was yesterday. He went to a rather nice do on Friday, £150,000 Stars and Stripes and Union Jack party. Wasn't invited. That was on the Hay Adams Hotel overlooking the White House. Well, it'll be nice. 300 guests, including Steve Bannon. He's also going to be there, as I said, with Boris Johnson, Liz Truss, Dame Priti Patel. What would you do if you were Keir Starmer? Because they've assembled a mini cabinet, apparently. This is the great brains of David Lammy, Keir Starmer, who else is in there, Rachel Reeves and so on. What would you do if you were Keir Starmer right now?
In order to build bridges with America.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Well, look,
not only that, and to counter Farage, Kemi Badenoch's quite an interesting point. Where is she?
Yeah, so she's really struggled with this, and I'm sure she'll struggle with reform rising in the polls. That party of Boris Johnson, Liz Truss and Nigel Farage is not a dinner table I'd want to be at anyway, personally.
Well, I don't think you were invited.
Well, me and Keir Starmer.
Yeah,
but,
well, that's right.
What would I do? I think I'd do what he's done for a lot of his prime ministership, which is start looking at kind of formal routes of diplomacy. There needs to be bridges built between the two administrations, and there are being. You know, there was a dinner with Lammy and and Starmer, and it is just about looking forward and not just being responsive, but anticipating what is going to happen.
Would you replace David Lammy? I mean, I'm not sure you should have anyone in there in that role saying that Trump was a neo-Nazi sympathising sociopath.
I mean, but then again, David Lammy's got a very good relationship with J.D. Vance, and so there are bridges to be built between them.
OK, let me ask you this. Yeah. So Peter Mandelson, he's another one, actually. He is the UK's ambassador to the US, or the incoming UK's ambassador to the US. Donald Trump may well veto his position. People have said this morning, well, that's outrageous, he's getting involved in UK politics. Actually, it's not, because the president has to approve that role. Yeah. So again, that would be a major problem. Peter Mandelson actually is changing his tune. He's now saying, well, China is a threat, because previously he'd basically pointed the finger at Trump and said that Trump was standing in the way of China and that we need to increase our deals with China. But Peter Mandelson could well be out. How much of a problem is that for Starmer?
I think it is a massive problem, and I think Starmer actually has a rather tactical choice to be made here, and there is an argument to say that he could put Nigel Farage forward as the possible ambassador to the United States. I mean, Nigel Farage is coming out bragging about his relationship with Trump, how he's the best British politician to be able to work with Trump. Why don't we see if that's the case, and we send him to Washington and we see if he can get a good deal for us? It keeps him out of British politics, which, I mean, if that's what Keir Starmer wants, if he's really concerned about reform, then he can stand to benefit from that. And there could be a trade deal to be had between the UK and the US.
It's so funny you say that. I said this right at the beginning. I said, actually, if I had a problem like Nigel Farage, which is a problem for Starmer, the best way of actually annulling that is to make him UK's ambassador to the US.
Yeah, well, look, there's a lot to be said on the topic. The newspapers this week are reporting that Farage is boasting to his room of Americans that he'll be Prime Minister before the next election.
He is.
So whether he'll take the job, which will not be offered to him as ambassador to the United States anyway, it means stepping down as an MP.
Wouldn't that be very magnanimous of Starmer if he did offer it?
Would it be magnanimous? I mean, there's very practical reasons for doing it. Look, it won't happen, magnanimous or not.
Why won't
it? Won't happen because he'd step down as an MP, something he's run 7 times without success for. It won't happen because it would stunt
most MPs run before they get in.
I know. It won't.
I thought that was a low blow.
It won't happen because he, I think, is enjoying his time in Parliament. He is. He's a sort of informal ambassador to the US anyway, and it's a conversation that just won't happen. I don't think he'd accept the job, and I don't think it would be offered.
It's interesting. I mean, just in terms of that. So Peter Mandelson, I think, is in somewhat of trouble. We've also got Farage as well over there. Just in terms of, where do you see the UK government and also the opposition parties talking about relationships with Europe? Yeah. Yesterday we talked about Ed Davey and his kind of attitude towards the European Union.
Yeah.
Should we concentrate on Europe or concentrate on the US?
I think we need to. I mean, it sounds like a cop-out answer, but I think we need to strike a balance between the two. I mean, we can have perfectly good trade deals with the EU, we can have perfectly good relations with the EU, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we need to turn our back on the United States. But I think Keir Starmer needs to take the diplomatic initiative. I think he needs to formally apologise to President Trump for the comments he's made, for the comments that members of his cabinet has made in the past, and I think he needs to set aside his ideological and political differences and get what's best for the British people.
Let's talk about Sadiq Khan. Yesterday I played these 2 clips in the London Assembly. He refused to answer Susan Hall, who I thought did a marvellous job, and basically saying, tell me about the grooming gangs, is it a problem in London? He refused to answer. He kept trying to get her to say these are Pakistani grooming gangs. I personally think she probably should have done that, but anyway, it had huge traction with our audience. And then Alex Wilson, who's Reform's member in the Assembly, said, look, knife crime is a major problem and we need to have a cross-party solution to this. Sadiq Khan then says, I make it as a matter of principle never to work with Reform, which I thought was rather puerile and pathetic. But this morning, Sadiq Khan has written an op-ed in The Observer saying the West must face up to a century-defining battle against a resurgent far right that is on the march across the developed world. He calls on ministers to take on extremism ahead of Donald Trump's second inauguration as US president. He says progressives across the Western world face a century-defining challenge and the stakes for liberal democracy couldn't be higher. The hard right and the far right are on the march. These are deeply worrying times, especially if you're a member of a minority community. Sadiq Khan is the mayor of London.
So it isn't the mayor.
He is the mayor of London, and he's writing an op-ed about Donald Trump and the far right. I want him to sort out his LTNs, the ULEZ, the flower pots in the middle of the road, the fact he can't drive anywhere.
Yeah, so if he wasn't the mayor of London, I don't totally disagree with the contents of his messaging, with the messaging anyway. But the bigger point is, I think this needs to be seen about how it's impacting the broader Labour Party, which is now the leading party of the UK and their relationship with America.
Well, they're neck and neck with, hang on a minute, the latest poll is they're neck and neck with reform.
And the last general election was a thumping majority. But,
yes. But hang on a minute, we've moved on significantly.
Sure.
And you can see the dissatisfaction of people in the Labour government currently.
So that op-ed shouldn't have been posted. There is a history of...
Why don't I throw that back to you and say this is freedom of speech, he's allowed to write what he wants?
And I agree with both things. I think I don't think he should... You know, he's allowed to write what he wants, and I don't think it's good for the party for it to happen, and not the day before Inauguration Day. There's a history of attack from Trump towards London, and this idea that's been... you know, ideas of radicalism in London that aren't necessarily reflective of reality, and knife crime, and there is a sort of PR battle going on, and has been going on for many years.
But we do have a problem with radicalism, and we do have a problem with knife crime.
Not to the extent, you know, the idea that police can't go to many places in London. There was a smear campaign from the Trump team about Sadiq Khan and from Elon Musk. But look, there needs to be adult politics.
Yeah. I mean, I basically agree with much of what James has just said. I mean, look, I don't think Sadiq Khan should have come out and written the op-ed. I mean, look, as we say, he's got the right to do it. He's got the right to express his views. But if he's an incumbent mayor of London, and we're already dealing with difficult relationships with the US, the last thing you want to do is, before the president-elect is taken his oath into office, the last thing you want to do is basically be insulting.
Yeah, I have to go to a break. But I mean, if I was a spin doctor in Number 10, I'd be pulling my hair out right now. We'll continue with our Future Politics panel with Jonas and with Oliver after this break.
Government borrowing costs hit a 27-year high, and the pound is taking a pounding. Gloomy economic data is expected to show inflation and growth are off course.
Let me ask again, and can you please be clear? Will Rachel Reeves be your Chancellor for the duration of this parliament?
Rachel Reeves is doing a fantastic job. She has my full confidence. She has the full confidence of the entire party.
Can Rachel Reeves hold on as Chancellor?
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back. I've got some breaking news for you. Hamas has released the names of 3 women who it says it will release first. They are Romy Gonen, Doron Steinbrecher and British-Israeli Emily Damari among the first hostages set to be released today. So the 3 names have now been released. Now that changes things significantly. So that ceasefire was due to come into effect at 6:30, so we're now 2.5 hours after that. Israel delayed it because they said they didn't have the names. They now have the names. Israel has continued to carry out strikes on Gaza. 10 people have been killed today since the truce was due to start. That's according to Hamas-run civil defence agency. And we're watching that closely. Doron Steinbrecher, 31, a veterinary nurse, she was in her apartment in Kibbutz Kfar Aza when the Hamas attacked. Emily Damari. Now, she holds dual British-Israeli nationality. She was taken hostage from Kibbutz Kfar Aza as well. Romy Gonen, 24, she was ambushed as she tried to escape from the Supernova Festival. That is the breaking news. As I say, 10 people have been killed since that ceasefire was due to come into effect at 6:30 this morning. We'll bring you the latest on all of that as and when we get it. Let me just ask you, gentlemen, very quickly about this, and it's just a story that caught my eye. The owner of Poundland, one of Britain's, I'm sure you don't go to Poundland, but I love a Poundland. One of Britain's biggest discount retailers is drafting in city advisors to explore radical options for arresting the growing crisis. They're part of Pepco Group. They've owned Poundland since 2016. They are looking at whether they should restructure. They're losing tons of money. Should they restructure, have a CVA, a company voluntary arrangement, restructuring? I just wonder, what does it say about the British economy when a pound shop can't survive?
Well, I think that's a question you should probably ask Rachel Reeves. And I think we've seen as well with, she's willing to increase borrowing. She said the other day to fund more public sector works. Look, the British economy is in a dire situation, and I think that is as a result of Rachel Reeves' policies. We saw her budget in October. Apparently this was supposed to be a Labour government that was going to be pro-business, going to be pro-economic growth, and yet we see through their policies it's the complete opposite of that, and they're throwing working people under the bus.
You're using that term, working people. I hate that term, working people.
No, but it is true. I mean, look, you take something like the employers' national insurance contributions rises. Labour are insistent that this is only going to affect employers. What I think Labour don't realise is that employers are only going to be faced with 2 choices. Either they're going to have to raise prices on their goods and services, in which case working people are going to be paying more, or they're going to have to cut costs internally, make redundancies, etc., which is also going to affect working people. So that's what I mean. I think it's completely fair to say that they are.
It's just such politicians speak, working people. And what do you think, Poundland? I mean, Poundland is where you go, but when you're saving your penny, I mean, actually, you have to be careful because not everything is a pound.
Exactly, and things add up. I love Poundland, and my favourite Poundland on Edgware High Street.
Oh.
But
why is that your favourite one?
It was I do tour them, and I'll be beginning again from. I wouldn't extrapolate this too much to national insurance or the budget, or I would look. It's not rare for an old high street company to restructure. The questions I have are what happened to the death of the high street. Everything's gone online, and the Poundland model doesn't
interestingly, we're starting
online.
to see high street recovering apparently because the consumers actually have realised they quite like to touch clothes and feel them and look at them.
Yeah, and people have started to change their policies about buying and returning, and there's the environmental aspects. But
nevertheless,
I wouldn't extrapolate it to a Rachel Reeves budget. Because there are businesses that were once very like Woolworths and HMV that thrived on the high street.
I loved the Woolies.
That thrived on the high street,
But Simon Wolfson, and your point is really valid. Simon Wolfson, who's chief executive of Next, just said the employer's national insurance ill thought through. Even if you believe in the concept of it, you phase it in. You can't lumber business straight away.
I mean, I was going to say as well, 2/3 of firms and companies are saying that they're now losing confidence in the government to push for a pro-business economy. I think upwards of 70% of businesses are now concerned about the national insurance tax rises. I mean, I think it is fair to extrapolate that the two are linked. Businesses are going to be suffering as a result of this, and consumers are going to be on the worst end of that.
I'm a passionate believer in not giving statistics to say that things are getting better, but only things get better when people feel they're getting better.
Yeah, and that that was the government's fault, though, because they talked it down, so there is no confidence.
But the confidence seems to be re-emerging, which is, and I'm happy to have the opportunities brought up, which is...
Can I have some of your glasses, your rose-coloured glasses?
Which is we're now starting to see projections of growth. We're now starting to see inflation come towards...
0.1%. It was due to be 0.2%.
It wasn't. It was the IMF upgraded it to 1.6%. It's not to say that everything's great. Things are only great when people feel they're great. But they're 6 months into office.
And look how badly they've performed already.
But what's the metric, which is inflation is coming down, 1.6% growth is projected. But they are 6 months into office and trying to revitalise
I tell you what, why don't you both come back in another 6 months or before that, and let's see how they're getting on. Thank you very much indeed to both of you. Really good to see you. That's Jonas Dean, their political commentator, Oliver Dean, who is political commentator with Young Voices UK. That was today's Future Politics panel.
The Future Politics panel.
Keep all your messages coming in, please. Lots more still to come on the programme in the next few minutes. Sunday surgery. Apparently, you can be fat, but you can be healthy. We'll be talking about that in our Sunday surgery. Vicky Godfrey, nutritional therapist and co-founder of DNA Apal, will be joining me after the break. And, of course, Whooper will be here to talk us about all the latest royal news.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Good morning. It's just after 9 o'clock on Sunday, January the 19th. I'm David Bull. It's weekend breakfast. That means it's the weekend, and that means there's great news. That's right. It's Tin Can Day today. Wow, who knew? It's a day to honour the humble object invented in the early 1800s by a French inventor called Philippe-Henri de Gérard. Bien sûr. Bientôt. It revolutionised the military and the world of exploration. The reason for this is soldiers and explorers could now travel long distances without worrying about the shelf life of their food. How clever. Also, today is National Popcorn Day. Yes, that's right, a day that celebrates the versatile taste, the fun that popcorn brings when you throw it around the cinema. It goes everywhere, all over your feet. Now you can choose, is it butter and salt, is it caramel, or is it cheese? I used to love making popcorn in the microwave. Did that as a child. It's Brew a Potion Day today, a day where you put on your witch hat, you make your own magical concoctions. These potions, of course, made popular by things like Harry Potter. Now, which would you do? If you made a potion, what would you do? Would you make one that makes you immortal? Would you cure disease? Or would you make people fall in love with you? Make some potion.
And my potion, my beautiful potion.
Yes, my beautiful potion. Let's move on to today's fascinating facts.
Today's fascinating facts.
So many to choose from. Some new ones. I just want to mention this one, actually, because it's so good. 1736, the birth in Greenock of James Watt. Of course, the Scottish inventor who developed Newcomen's steam engine. He gave his name to a unit of power. On this day in 1813, Sir Henry Bessemer, who gave his name to a process for converting cast iron into steel, which we talked about earlier with our tin cans, was born in Charlton in Hertfordshire. On this day in 1915, more than 20 people were killed when German Zeppelins bombed England for the first time. The bombs were actually dropped on Great Yarmouth and on King's Lynn as well. The first play for British television was broadcast today in 1937. It was called The Underground Murder Mystery. It was written by J. Bissell Thomas. And on this day in 2015, the death of Anne Kirkbride. She was known for her long-running role as Deirdre Barlow in the ITV soap Coronation Street. Amazingly, she played that role for 42 years, from 1972 until 2014. And those are today's fascinating facts. Well, a very good morning to you. The big story of this morning, Israel confirms that the hostage list has now been received. The papers are woefully out of date, as you would expect. Now, I've been bringing you the latest updates on this all through this morning. Hamas has now released the names of the first 3 Israeli hostages it plans to free after the ceasefire was delayed. This has just happened. So the ceasefire was due to come into effect about 6:30, at 6:30. So we got these just before 9. They are 31-year-old Doron Steinbrecher, dual British-Israeli Emily Damari, 28. They were kidnapped from their kibbutz, as well as a 24-year-old Romy Gonen, who was taken from the Supernova Festival. In that intervening period from 6:30, when the ceasefire was due to come into effect, until now, Israel has subsequently carried out strikes on Gaza. 10 people now reported to have been killed in those hours since 6:30. This is an evolving situation. We'll keep you up to date on that. This is a big story I was talking to the boys about in Future Politics panel. The Mail, Team Trump's revenge on Starmer for meddling in the US election. It's a cracking story, but essentially they're exacting revenge on the Labour Party for pushing activists to actively campaign against Donald Trump in the US election. I think Jonas made a good point, which is they weren't really officially there, or weren't an official delegation of number 10, but there again, it's not a great look when you campaign for the opponent of of the new incoming president. Well, the copy is that now they are amassing forces to campaign for Nigel Farage to be Prime Minister. This morning, this is in the Telegraph, Nigel Farage has predicted he could be Prime Minister before Donald Trump actually leaves office in 4 years. He says there is going to be a worldwide political tide of right-wing election wins. He told Republicans at a party to celebrate Trump's inauguration he believes he will win the next election. He said this is the beginning of the political tide. It's going to be spreading across the Western world. He also says there's much else happening across Europe, including in the set of islands I come from. There is a new insurgent political party led by a maverick from the outside. So that's the big story in the Mail this morning. Also, Peter Mandelson, who was meant to be the UK's ambassador to the US, the story here is Mandelson at risk from MAGA? To exact revenge. Mandelson's not exactly been kind about Trump in the past. He has changed his tune in recent days, but it looks like Donald Trump may veto that appointment as well. That's going to make very difficult reading in number 10 this morning as well. Keep all your messages coming in, because I'm asking this morning, if you had the power and you could deport anyone from this country, and there are many, who would you deport and why? The number 0344 499 1000. You can text the word talk in your message to 87222. You can message us on X as well. Many of you getting in touch. Amanda, good morning to you. Amanda in London says, Dr. David, the man, this man is completely out of his depth, this man being Sadiq Khan. He is totally unsuitable to hold such an important position. He has single-handedly destroyed London. He is a prime candidate for deportation. Deborah in Essex. Good morning to you, Deborah. Hi, David. I would deport every person without documentation, and Sadiq Khan, and by the way, Keir Starmer as well. Deborah says, I love the show. Deborah, thank you very much for your very kind comments. Dr. David says, now, I would deport all illegal immigrants, all foreign nationals that have committed crimes. That's a great one. All those people who have overstayed their visas. That should free up about 1 million places. Chris Sinclair says, right, David, here's the list. I'm going to deport Ed Miliband, clown, David Lammy, idiot, Rachel Reeves from accounts, Keir Starmer, a waste of space, and Sadiq Khan, who hates this country. Good morning, David. Who would I deport from this country? Says Peter. Every single illegal immigrant and immigrants that commit crimes in this country. I know it's harsh, but we need to get hold of this dire situation. I'll do one more. Sean says, David. Now, regarding who I would deport, can I deport myself to the Maldives? Brilliant idea. Keep all of those messages coming in. Let's do something different now. It's time for Sunday Surgery.
Dr. David Bull's Sunday Surgery.
Now, this is a really interesting article. It was pretty much reported in every single newspaper, but apparently, according to experts, obesity, which we talk about a great deal, is overdiagnosed. These experts want a new, fat but healthy label. So a group of scientists around the world has proposed this radical overhaul of how obesity is diagnosed and treated. This is part of a Lancet commission. At the moment, we use something which is called BMI, the body mass index, which essentially is a calculation with your weight and your height, and you come up with a number. Depending on the number, it then says whether you are overweight, whether you're obese, whether you're clinically obese. They say that this is out of date. They say that actually what we need to look at is waistband measurements, waist to hip and waist to height ratios, direct body fat measurements as well. Now, loads of people, loads of very clever doctors, 76 global organisations, including the Association of British Clinical Diabetologists, the Association for the Study of Obesity UK, all on board with this. They say actually they need to decide if you are overweight or if you are deemed to be heavy and you have clinical problems, then that is when you need to worry. I would question that, but then who am I to question that? I just think that actually this is about a bit more of self-control. Vicky Godfrey, nutritional therapist and co-founder of DNA Pal, joins me now. Good morning.
Good morning. Hello.
Really good to talk to you. Look, maybe I'm being draconian here. We have a major problem with obesity in this country. We know that. As a result of that, people get ill, they get ischemic heart disease, varicose veins, diabetes, osteoarthritis, you name it, they get it. we are seeing terrible nutritional diets being sort of consumed by people. The advent of fast food, what we call empty calories. People are getting fatter and fatter and fatter. And now, I know all these clever experts are saying, oh, look, we need to say you're fat but healthy. Where do you stand?
I mean, you mentioned about the BMI and is it outdated? I think it is in a way, because there are certain elements that it doesn't take into account. It doesn't take into if somebody's pregnant.
Yep.
Muscle weighs more than fat.
Yep.
So if you're athletic, you're going to look heavier, from a weight gain, but you're going to look in proportion. So I do understand there are some other things that need to be taken into account, measuring fat. The fat around the middle is the most dangerous. It's VAT, but not in the money sense, but visceral adipose tissue. And we do know that that can cause fatty heart, fatty liver. So I do think the fat around the middle, to look at it from a doctor's perspective, should also be brought into the picture of, obesity, because it will cause problems. And like you've highlighted with chronic disease, a lot of chronic disease is driven by inflammation. And a lot of the food that is on the supermarket shelves, full of sugar, full of E numbers, full of toxic preservatives, all go on to give the body inflammation or encourage, inflammation. And that picture there, that fat around the middle is the most dangerous in the body. It's not so bad if it's around the thighs or the bum, but that middle fat.
But Vicky, this is what I see in the high street every single day. Almost, not everyone, but a lot of people are looking more and more like that.
Now, but I look in people's trolleys. Do you ever look in the trolleys?
Yes, I do. It's my favourite pastime, actually. And I also look to see the colour, the colour of the goods that they're buying. Everything is white.
Yes. Or some people can barely walk as they're holding their trolley. Their trolley has become their Zimmer frame. And then I look in and it's all packaged ready meals. It's white, like you say, the white bread or 5 bottles of fat Coca-Cola in there. Or they might have the Coke Zero in there, but the Coke Zero is just full of chemicals that is not going to do your body any good nutritionally at all. And the weight is just going on and on and on. So I agree, but there needs to be a bigger change towards farm to plate.
I agree.
From the farm, if it looks real, obviously you don't want a live cow on your plate, of course not.
Well,
it really is. We need to go back to the old days before processed food came out. There wasn't fat people after the war, certainly not in the levels that we're seeing it now.
Well, and you make a brilliant point. In fact, the ration book, which was introduced, gave you very balanced nutrition, which is what we are not seeing currently. Look, I understand what these doctors are getting at, and they're saying, well, we need to have better metrics. Most clinical settings do not have advanced metrics where you can measure all of these things. And actually, I do think we need to say to people, there is personal responsibility here. If you eat like this, you are going to be fat. And then there's a big question of who picks up the pieces. Well, the answer is the taxpayer.
Yeah, because it's more stress on the NHS for things that people could take responsibility for. There is a little bit of a slight difference with genetic testing.
Yes, this is your thing, isn't it? Tell me about that.
Yes, so there's 2 genes that I find fascinating within this weight loss arena. One is the FTO gene, and the nickname is the fat gene. So some people can be predisposed to being fat or larger, but it doesn't mean it's their destiny. With genes, the genes are the loaded gun, and your diet, lifestyle and choices and supplement choices pull the trigger. Okay, so if somebody does show up with a high impact FTO gene, the first thing we do is we put them on protein with every meal. The FTO gene absolutely loves exercise, and all the research shows physical activity really brings that gene back into, balance. And then we've got the LEPR gene, which is about not being satisfied. So if you've got that gene, what it means is that going from your stomach to your brain, the neurotransmitter to tell you that you're satisfied and you'll feel full, is a little bit delayed. So therefore, people can eat their full meal, know what it's on their plate, and then they're just not satisfied, and they go back and they pick and they pick and they pick. So again, you know, eating slower, chewing. I mean, I don't know how you eat, but I'm a two chew a gulp.
To chew a gulp. I was going to say this idea is a really good one, because back in the day you sat at a table. You had conversation, so therefore you masticated, you chewed your food much more, and then you swallowed. Now people throw it down their throats, and of course you don't get the satiation that you would if you ate slowly.
That's right. And how many people do you see put down their knife and a fork halfway through the meal just to carry on their conversation, and then pick up their knife and fork? They don't. It's very fast meal times now. The ideal amount of chewing is 25 times.
Wow.
And when I've worked with clients, I'm saying 25 times, and they're like, "You're joking." I'm like, "Chew twice and swallow." But then the digestive system has to work harder, because your teeth that are supposed to do the job means your stomach acid has to work harder to break that food down, because you haven't chewed it, you know, masticated it as much for the digestive system. So you're putting more stress on the digestive system.
Can I just ask you about this idea about a set point? When I was much younger, I was much heavier, as people say. I then incorporated exercise, as you say, my genes like that, but also much more regimented in what I eat, so I don't have carbohydrates late at night, because I find that doesn't work for me. But I know a lot of nutritionists talk about a set point, that we go back to a set point and then we oscillate around that set point. So if you are heavier, is it possible to change your set point, your norm?
100%. 100%, I think. And the body is so wonderful, and the body can heal from so many conditions. We can easily bring it back into balance. But again, it's about putting the right things in at the right times. And as you've noticed, carbohydrates give you energy. So eating carbohydrates at night before bed, where is that extra energy going to go? Well, it's going to go in your fat cells, because, you know, in the old days, when we didn't have as much food as we have available to us now, the body would take the energy, store it into the fat to be used later on when you know, we didn't have food to use for energy. And now we're so overconsumed in this society that we live in. So it means that you know, the carbohydrates is just going to go straight on your tummy, straight on your thighs, because there's no time to burn it off, unless you're going to have some fun nighttime activity.
Good Lord, it's 9:20. Can I just ask you about this? Certainly when I was growing up, we were told always as children, you finish your plate because it's good for you. And that is the common rule for generations. And now there was an article which was in the Daily Mail this week saying 4 in 10 parents say they make their children eat everything in front of them. But the headline says, "Don't finish your dinner. Parents are fueling obesity crisis by forcing their kids to eat huge plates." This is according to the British Nutrition Foundation. I don't buy it. Surely it's about what you're eating.
When I was sent the headlines through, that was exactly my first reaction, is that the food that is probably going on their plates is probably quite highly processed, not cooked from scratch, full of sugar, full of preservatives and you know, E numbers, all that can add to weight. It's a chemical, you know, just lots of chemicals flying around the body. There's no nutrition to the cells. Then the cells aren't going to behave the correct way.
So I was just going to say, Vicky, my take-home messages are: eat sensibly, everything in moderation, and get some nighttime activity. That's what I learnt from you this morning.
Can I just add one thing? My son has the overeating gene.
Right.
And he's perfectly in balance. And he can eat 2 burgers, two jacket potatoes in one meal in the evening. Homemade, I might add. Wild, homemade, organic burgers, not from the shops. That I wouldn't eat that. And he is perfectly in balance. He trains football 4 times a week. And they just don't get given the wrong foods. Obviously, as a nutritionist, that would be a bad look for me. But their bodies are in balance, however much they eat. And he can eat. He can eat the size of an adult at 11 years old, and he's not fat.
Right.
Proving my point that the right food. Sorry, go on.
No, I was going to say I'm popping round for a burger later.
Yes, I make lovely ones. lovely homemade wild grass-fed burgers.
Well, I can't wait. Vicky, thanks ever so much for your time this morning. Vicky Godfrey, nutritional therapist and co-founder of DNA Pal. Really good to talk to you. That was today's Sunday Surgery.
The Future Politics Panel.
Just some breaking news coming in. We're hearing reports that the ceasefire deal has come into effect. It came into effect at 9:15 UK time, so that's the latest. So it appears that the ceasefire is now in place. This was complicated this morning. So the names of those 3 first hostages to be released were then released by Hamas. Now the ceasefire has come into effect. Make no mistake, this is going to be very, very fragile. And all eyes are watching what is going on. I was talking about the process. It's very complicated, and the timeline and what they're going to do, and in terms of the other hostages being released, women and children being released first. I think to quote Jonas from earlier, that everyone just hopes that this holds and that people can be reunited with their families on both sides. And of course, then you start the enormity of trying to rebuild the bombed areas, and how that will happen, goodness only knows. But we're hearing reports that the ceasefire has now come into effect, which came into effect, 8 minutes ago. We'll bring you more on that as and when we can. Right, I'm really keen to hear from you because I'm in a naughty mood this morning. So I'm asking, if you had the power, who would you deport and why? let me... Oh, my list is so long. 0344 499 1000. Also, I'll take some calls as well. Who would you deport and why? Let me know. This is Weekend Breakfast. Good morning.
£1.4 million of our taxpayers' money was given to the Met in the last year, so that they could actually monitor what stuff is going on YouTube from these drill rappers. These are linked with actual crimes. Yes. Dozens and dozens and dozens of actual stabbings and even murders are linked to these drill rappers and these sort of gang, sort of you dissed me in your rap, you dissed me. We are talking about actual crimes being celebrated and being basically threatened in this music. I think we need to talk about it.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Talk 9/27 January, Sunday, January the 19th. Breaking news reports the ceasefire deal has now come into effect. That came into effect at 9:15 UK time, so 15 minutes ago. The hostage release is actually going to begin at 2 o'clock. That's our time. So the ceasefire deal, thankfully, has come into effect. The hostages to be released after 2 p.m. It is a very complicated situation. Nick Dubois is on after me, and he will bring you up to speed with that and keep our eyes peeled on what is going on. Lots of comments coming in as well. I'm asking this morning, who would you deport if you had the power, and why would you deport them? I would deport David Lammy, says Laura in Nottingham. Good morning. Do I need an explanation? Not really. The most damaging politician in this era, in my opinion. Dr. David, don't be silly, says Chris in Newbury, or Chris Newbury. I never know, Chris. Let me know. Are you Chris Newbury or Chris in Newbury? Anyway, call centre of the year manager 2018, Rachel Reeves. Increasing national insurance on companies won't make them fire people or increase prices. No, companies will just lower their profits to help Labour fix the foundations. It is socialist economics. Lots of other messages coming in as well. Maggie in London, I am sick of this rhetoric, David. If we don't go along with the left view that we're all right-wing and racist, for example, if Khan didn't spout racism every time he speaks, he'd have nothing to say. The racism shout is a good cover for his failed mayorship in London, like knife crime and more. This is the editorial, the op-ed that he's written this morning in The Observer, basically talking about the rise of the far right. He says, there is a march of fascism as Trump takes power. Listen, Sadiq Khan, concentrate on London and the fact the city is falling apart. You can't drive anywhere. You've put those stupid 20-mile-an-hour areas in. You can't move. The ULEZ cameras, concentrate on that and the knife crime and the fact that kids are dying on the streets of London instead of wading into global affairs. But anyway, that's just my thing. Let's take a call. Harry is in Portsmouth. Good morning.
Yes, hello there. Good morning, David.
Good morning. Sorry about my rant about Sadiq Khan, but it annoyed me.
No, I agree with every word. He's just a political operator with a lawyer bent to him. He avoids every question, and he's got the answer. It's already scripted in his head. It's not a spur of the moment thing. He's got a pat script in his head from his lawyering days.
Yeah. I agree. And also, just the fact yesterday, you're right, he couldn't answer Susan Hall, and he kept trying to trip her up. And at the end of the day, you are there and accountable to the people of London. I thought his behaviour was disgraceful.
Yeah, I thought those sessions were there to assist the public in understanding what was going on, but
they are.
I don't think we got anywhere.
We didn't. Anyway, that's not why you rang.
No, I'm talking about getting somewhere. The two people, a double one, I'd like to nominate for deportation, yes, would be the two main rail union leaders, the ASLEF and the RMT.
Brilliant.
Now, we've had problems with winter fuel payment cutbacks, talk by Badenoch and even Starmer's department agreeing that they may look at the triple lock. And yesterday, I think it was, I think it was ASLEF, they want train drivers to retire at 55.
Yeah, and they want more money. So just to remind you...
And the pay rise this year as well.
Yeah, they did. So they got train guards got 15%, train drivers got 14.25%. Actually...
I'm talking about this coming year.
Yeah, no, I know, and they want more money as well. But this is the problem, isn't it? That if you, as a Labour government, come into power, you pay off the unions. The unions... They sense a weak government. They want more.
Yeah. Now Louise Haig's not the Transport Minister, perhaps she should look at the Sheffield, Doncaster, Sheffield, Robin Hood Airport. It shut about 2 years ago. I heard mumblings from her, because she's Sheffield MP, Ed Miliband, some mumblings, but of course, once the day it shuts, you never hear anything more. Why doesn't she concentrate on at least doing something on her own patch?
So you're saying that elected officials should concentrate on the area they're elected to? What? Wow, that's novel, isn't it?
Yes. And I'm very peeved about the railways. Over 6 years ago, I gave up my car. I've listened to the propaganda. Due to various other reasons, I thought, I'll just try giving up the car, see what materialises. Well, for the first year and a half, There was the strikes, all the different train companies on strikes that affected me. COVID appeared for 2 years, and magically there was no strikes because they were all on guaranteed rostered money, unlike some other people. Then, as soon as COVID finished, they were full steam ahead on the strikes again.
So the bit that I don't get, and look, I understand that fine, if you think you need to encourage people to use the railways, but make them cheaper. They are so expensive that it makes no economic sense for people to actually go on the trains. I'm thinking about my particular journey from London to Ipswich, was about 50, 60 quid. It's an hour.
Yeah. I mean, not particularly cheap, but the thing is, they're going to be even more expensive with these pay rises in. The fact that they will not come round to is they talk about, say, London to Manchester, HS2, or an important businessman needs to get from London to Manchester. Well, if they use Norfolk Airport, the RAF place, they could fly from there to Manchester and be there in an hour. No need to build the HS2.
It's against net zero.
Yeah. So, they know how much the railways cost to run, and yet they don't do anything about improving efficiency.
Harry,
they just cancelled the Stonehenge tunnel.
Yep.
And now they want to spend the money they've saved. There's suggestion from the pressure groups. Let's spend some money on the London Salisbury Exeter line.
Really good to talk to you, Harry. Thank you very much for that. That's Harry in Portsmouth there. Loads of you getting in touch. Carol says, now, David, I know the current Prime Minister has various nicknames. I don't know if anyone has said Starmer the Harmer. Very good, Carol. That's Carol in sunny Clacton. I know who your MP is. Right, time 9:34. We'll take a break. After the break, Rupert Bell will join me because it's time for Rupert's World Roundup. That's all still to come. It's Weekend Breakfast.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
About 9:36, Weekend Breakfast, Sunday, January the 19th. So I'm asking this morning, if you had the power, who would you deport from the United Kingdom? It's certainly captured your imagination this morning. Good morning, Dr. David says, Rachel in Wales. I'd deport the entire Welsh government. Good one. Tim in Southampton. David, what did the special relationship count for when Obama intervened in the Brexit debate and said Britain would be back of the queue for a trade deal if we left the EU? Ironically, Britain could have a trade deal with the US if we had remained I think you mean couldn't, but anyway, remained in the EU. It's a good point, though, Tim, thank you. This is interesting. Pat says, Dr David, Farage is for Britain and the British people. Starmer is not. Starmer and Khan are anti-British and they are destroying my country. This one says, I'd deport Ed Miliband, the architect of the biggest act of self-harm in UK history, and that includes the COVID response and the evaluation to that, the single biggest threat to the UK's future prosperity. Zandra in Wrexham. Hi, David, great show as ever. I love watching your show. That's very sweet, thank you. The person I would deport would be Starmer. He hasn't got a clue what he's doing. He's made the country such a mess, and the sooner he goes, the better. Hi, David. This is Carol. I love the show as always. Thank you very much. I would deport the whole Labour cabinet because their mantra is pull the ladder up, Jack. I'm all right. They have no thoughts about anyone else. By the way, this is really interesting. I saw this article this morning. Apparently, Angela Rayner breached the ministerial code over claims she asked civil servants to help her move into Admiralty House. Apparently, she reportedly instructed officials in her private office to assist with her move into the Grace and Favour property in Whitehall. This included, wait for this, transporting the furniture, cleaning the accommodation, according to a formal complaint about her conduct. It's been made by Paul Holmes, who's the Tory MP and Shadow Minister. It's gone to the Director of Propriety and Ethics at the Cabinet Office, as well as the Permanent Secretary at Rayner's department. He said, if it is correct that civil servants were told to assist Rayner's move, it is a clear breach of the ministerial code. That code says ministers are appointed to serve the public. They must ensure no conflict arises or could reasonably be perceived to arise between their public duties and their private interests, financial or otherwise. It states holders of public office must avoid placing themselves under any obligation to people or organisations that might try inappropriately to influence their work. So Angela Rayner may be in hot water once again. Keep all those messages coming in. Who would you deport? Why would you deport them? Now, here's someone that I wouldn't deport. It is time for Rupert's Royal Roundup.
Rupert's Royal Roundup.
Rupert! Good morning, Rupert.
Well, good afternoon, David. Welcome to Vietnam, middle of the Mekong. Thank you very much. I look red-faced just like that little trail because I've got sunburn. It's all very good. And it's nicely hot and sweaty here. So there we go.
Lovely. Sounds lovely. Look, I mean, very kind of you to break into your holiday and gallivanting around the world as you are. But I'm very grateful.
Well, thank you, David. Yeah, well, I just thought I've been by the pool all day that I can spare you 20 minutes or so of my time.
You can really go off people, by the way, and thanks for sending that photo as well. I was really not very happy about that when I saw that this morning.
Well, I just thought I'd rub it in, but anyway.
Now, there's a brilliant article which is about Harry and Meghan, our favourite couple, which was in the Telegraph. Harry and Meghan have really fallen out of favour, haven't they, with pretty much everyone. Harry and Meghan, according to this, we know they went to Pasadena in LA to offer hugs and sympathy to survivors of the wildfires. And it's gone down really badly.
Yes, well, this article, it's all come out from a long article in Vanity Fair, which used to be a magazine that had certainly favourable views of Meghan and Harry, but this is a very detailed sort of analysis of their current state of play, talking to various people who have worked with them while they've been in America and sort of all trying to get an all-round picture. But reading the article, what you actually feel is that it's all very negative. One person does say, I think in the article, they seem very loved up, but it's the way that, of course, before they left, there were bullying allegations against Meghan. And now they're saying that once again, this leopard hasn't changed her spots and that she has once again been bullying staff, talking about the podcast, which was very unsuccessful and how difficult it was to put that together and just the way they've gone about their behaviour, their sort of approach to life. Nothing has changed. And certainly people in Montecito don't seem to like them very much. And it just really puts their current state of play that, as if she's got this program coming out in being delayed now, coming out at the beginning of March. We saw her, of course, going to have that visit in Pasadena to meet some people who were victims of the horrible fires in LA, losing their houses. But again, their PR strategy just doesn't seem to be working. And if Vanity Fair has turned against them, then the future at the moment is pretty bleak for the Sussexes.
I mean, Justine Bateman, who's a Hollywood filmmaker, said Meghan Markle and Harry are no better than ambulance chasers. What a repulsive photo op they achieved. They're touring the damage. What are they? Are they politicians? They don't live in Pasadena. They are tourists. They're disaster tourists. I mean, this has come across very badly indeed. They wrote a huffy-puffy, according to this article, 631-word whine about Zuckerberg's decision to end the censorship on, this is on Facebook. They basically use these dreadful words again: normalising hate speech, sowing division, undermining diversity and equality, endangering marginalised communities, destroying democracy. Do you know what? I don't think it is actually about the PR necessarily. I think it's about the intent. The intent, as far as I can see, is to further their own interests rather than looking after people that they purport to represent.
Well, I think one of the problems is they've commercially got to make their life work. And obviously that's their most important priority now. How can they live the life that they want? Now, but America doesn't want dukes and duchesses running around the country. It's just not in their DNA. And yet here they are, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex are promoting, their life, and it's not going down well. And more importantly, they say they don't want the press, but they need the press. And their hypocrisy is currently writ large because they need the oxygen of publicity, but the way they're going about it is basically causing them more problems, and people are seeing through the act that they're bringing to the party. Now, his trial is going to be happening this week in London, the start of against the MGM and News International, I believe. So it's a big week for him in the court of law over here. So it's going to be, again, they're going to be attracting all sorts of headlines. But for Meghan and Harry at the moment, it's not going well for them, particularly as America appears to be definitely turning against them.
Well, I mean, I don't know if you've seen this. In the Sunday Times today, Prince Harry is said to have pitched a sociopath podcast to the Spotify. A lengthy new profile of the couple reveals this. This is again in Vanity Fair. They've got this deal with Spotify. Apparently, so he's pitched this really weird idea about, let's do a show on sociopaths.
Well, yes, we sort of heard this before. So the article at times has gone over sort of things that have been already out there, much talked about, that some of his ideas were seen as stark raving mad. And the idea that interviewed Vladimir Putin to find out why he was a sociopath, it just seemed to me a pretty stupid idea, which was laughed out by all accounts by the people behind it, because it just wasn't going to get off ground. How he even thought that was a good idea. But of course, he does play, he's in this article has said that, he basically still feels that his mother was murdered, and he doesn't know why he hasn't turned out to be a bit of a sociopath himself. But, what it also says is he's not particularly good at reading the room. And he may not be, a bit like his uncle, the brightest tool in the box. So I think that might be part of the,
Yeah. So, front page of the Mail. I'll tell you who looks fantastic. Sophie looks fantastic. 60. She's 60. And there's a lot of talk about her. She and her husband have just got on with it. She's kind of like a bit of a secret weapon, and she's really come into her own, I think, and she's matured. She's got an amazing dress sense now. I mean, I think it's fair to say, and you know far more than me, that when their engagement was announced, she was sort of, let's just say she dressed rather differently in sort of clompier shoes, and now obviously she's looking very elegant.
Yeah, well, definitely. And I think one of the things, I think she's got confidence now in her role. She completely is at one with her status. She came from a PR background in the 90s, in the day for Capital Radio, and then from a PR perspective, married in 1999. It hasn't always been a smooth road, but definitely towards the end of the Queen's and Prince Philip's life, she started to get more and more, her role became within the family. much more important and was very helpful at all times. But more importantly, and I know from speaking from people who work within the Duke and Duchess of Edinburgh's office, that they are a very hard-working pair. They don't want fuss and bother. They just want to get on with it and try and help the royal family out as much as possible. And she is very much part of that and wants to just be, right, what do I need to do? I'll get on with it. She also does promote some pretty bold causes. I mean, she's not frightened of going to Ukraine and various other places to try and draw attention to certain issues. So she's definitely has an understanding of what part she has to play within the pared down royal family.
And of course she concentrates on women's issues, doesn't she, in conflict zones, and I admire her for that. So good for her and happy birthday to her. I did name drop earlier. I've had dinner with her, so I just thought I'd throw that at you, Rupert. Have you?
No, I haven't.
Oh, dear.
1-0 to David Bowl, but have you presented an award to the Princess Royal? Anyway, there we go.
Oh, very good. Touche, yes. Very good. I have to go to a break. Can you hang on a couple of minutes? Because there are a couple of fantastic stories, including a pub chain, which we'll talk about in a minute, Rupert, if we can. Rupert will rejoin us after the break. This is Weekend Breakfast. Good morning.
The government collects so much money from us on roads, for example. You know, the road tax keeps going up. You know, electric car drivers are now going to be paying road tax as well. I mean, 40 billion, I think, was the last estimate I was told, that is collected every single year. We've got places like Transport for London in London, where they collect hundreds of millions of pounds every year in ULEZ fines, in parking fines. You know, every single council in Britain is absolutely lording it up with millions and millions of pounds. And yet the roads get worse. Why don't they spend some of that money on the bleeding roads?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
This is Talk 952. Rupert Bell joining me live from Vietnam. Of course he is. Rupert, how are you doing? All right?
All right, just waiting for the first mojito.
Waiting for the first gin, I should think, and if I know you well enough. Now, talking about booze, there's quite a brilliant story, isn't there, about Prince William?
Yes, well, as you know, I'm an Aston Villa supporter.
I'm sorry about
that. But earlier this week, the future king, we know he is also a passionate Aston Villa supporter, as is his son George. They can, when it's all has to be worked out, often go to Villa Park, and the king, future king, will also nip into Bodymore Heath, which is the Aston Villa training ground, at any time if he should happen to be passing. But he wanted to arrange a chance when he was in Birmingham, he'd been talking at a conference for paramedics in Birmingham that was taking place, I think, on Wednesday. And then after that visit, he said, before I take my train back to London, I'd like to meet some proper die-hard Villa fans on their way to watch the match against Everton. And so he's ended up in a Wetherspoons, 8 of them, Wetherspoons table. I think he had a pint of cider, but they had a pint of Wetherspoons finest. And they had, by all accounts, the fans who were there, okay, they were hand-picked, but they all said that when they were talking Villa, he knew exactly what was going on with regard to the team, the transfers, how they've been playing, and he did say that as soon as he got home, he'd be watching the game. Luckily, the Aston Villa won 1-0, so that would have pleased him, and as it did me as well. But he shows that when it comes to Aston Villa, this is not a fake fan moment, as sometimes people in politicians, we've suddenly Tony Blair discovering that he was a die-hard Newcastle fan and was somewhat exposed, I think, by his lack of knowledge. So for once, we genuinely say Prince William's interest in Aston Villa is not just something for the headlines. He is a genuine fan.
For me, the bigger story, he was in the Spoons. I mean, who doesn't love a Spoons, including the future king?
Well, and Spoons at a station too.
I mean, right. Brilliant.
But the New Street Spoons is one I haven't been into. I'm sure it was given a big clean-up before he arrived. And but anyway, the fact is, there he was in Birmingham, going around meeting Villa fans. I don't think Birmingham City fans think of it, but for Villa fans, it just proves that it's it's something that he's genuine about.
Very funny. Rupert, you're like this, by the way. I mean, you speak terribly well. You speak with Queen's English. You have received pronunciation. Apparently, your accent tells a lot about people. So apparently, if you are well-spoken, if you have received pronunciation, you're perceived to be smarter, more educated and richer than people with other accents.
Smarter, no. You haven't seen my school.
That is true.
Why am I giving up time on my holiday to talk to you? So obviously I'm not rich enough. So, so there you go.
Brilliant, Rupert. Honestly, I appreciate it so much that you've taken the time out of your hard-earned holiday to join me this morning. Rupert Bell there in Vietnam, live. That was today. Rupert, well wound up.
Rupert's Royal Roundup.
From Rupert Bell to Nick Dubois, good morning, young man.
From royalty to commoner.
From royalty to other royalty, more royalty.
Were you talking football with Rupert Bell there?
Yes, I was.
I just heard a little bit out of my ear.
Did, yes. I was much more intrigued that the future king was in Wetherspoons.
Oh, I'm impressed. The future king is in Wetherspoons.
But as I say, who doesn't love a spoons?
Well, there you go.
Well, I mean, honestly.
I use it at Stansted Airport all the time. Yes,
there's one in Canary Wharf I pop into occasionally.
Yeah.
How are you? What's coming up?
Well, what's coming up? We got a great first hour. In fact, I'm going to have to do nothing. I'm just going to go make a cup of tea. I've got Johnny Gould and Claire Muldoon in.
I'm not going to word in,
am I? So I should just go make a cup of tea. We're going to cover some of the top 5 stories in that. I mean, there's some fascinating stuff out there. The one that I've got mixed feelings about is the way the Daily Mirror have made the NHS story about how shocking it is on the wards. And I'm going, mate, this isn't shocking. This is happening in Harlow Hospital. It's happening in other hospitals everywhere. That's what's shocking, and why it's.
I think for me, and look, many of my friends still work in hospitals, but it's just the fact that this is the new normal, and that's what my friends are telling me, is that they're not blind to it, but because it's just every day.
Yeah.
It's just horrific.
And it must be horrific to work in. And I've experienced that firsthand with my mother-in-law in those circumstances. But there's a very interesting piece in the Times, if you get time to read it. It's written by their European correspondent who lives in France, and he tells the French story of healthcare. And he's not pretending it's perfect, but it's a damn sight better. And guess what is at the root of it? You have a social insurance scheme for those who can't play. You have a contributory insurance scheme. It's regulated. It's none of... You know how the left always talk about America and how horrible it is. And people have a stake in the healthcare. They put a better value on it. And you get seen, you know...
Where's that? I need to read that.
It's in the Times. It's a great story. And I've been saying we don't need to look further than places like Holland or France for the solution, and just be prepared to say maybe people having a stake in it with social insurance schemes, which translates to, by the way, if you can't afford it, it gets provided by the state, and us. Do you know what? Instead of paying ridiculous taxes that are going to waste in the NHS, perhaps we could look at an alternative forms of
I have
investment.
long championed actually reforming the whole system because it's broken.
It is.
It's not designed for what we now do. So I will go and read that.
Yeah, no, a good story to do that. We'll obviously have the latest on Gaza. That's been unfolding, as you
The
will
Israeli
be
foreign
well
minister is giving a press conference at the moment.
Yes, and I know Johnny Gould will have a lot to say about that, of course, on his score. Theo Usherwood coming in, great political commentator. We'll be picking off 5 stories. Apparently, Reform have picked up a promise of 10 million quid last night in America. So I wonder how that'll reignite all the screaming about who's donating to the party.
I asked this morning who's having a great week. I would argue Nigel Farage is having a great week. He's having a lovely time.
Well, to be honest, he's had several great weeks, hasn't he? Let's be clear.
But I mean, I think it's more the fact that Labour, I mean, whichever way you look at this, Labour is fighting fires on so many levels, and I don't think they know which way to turn.
It's interesting. I mean, I heard you sort of talking about, you know, it's time running out for them. In many ways, time is running out for them, but of course they've got